Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier, of course, of sci-fi or cinema, take your pick, your archbishop of Banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, your evangelist of the imagination, and of course, your existential Mr. Rogers. Lest we forget, these are all names that have been bestowed upon me by you imagination connoisseurs, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am, of course, once again, robcasting at you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations, episode number 653. My God, 653. We are marching ever so slowly to episode 666. The satanic playlist is growing. I'm very proud of all of you. I'm learning about music I've frankly never heard of before, and I'm there for it. So I want to thank you. You know what I'm not there for, though? I got to tell you. There is a storytelling trope that I quite frankly am sick of. And I think it actually ruined something that I was really looking forward to this year more than most, which was CBS's new 9-episode adaptation of Stephen King's The Stand. And what is this storytelling trope, you may ask? Out-of-sequence storytelling, flashbacks, flash forwards. It seems like almost every TV series is relying on these. You see some opening scene that catches your interest, then it's like 24 hours earlier. And this is happening with everything. With The Stand, I think it completely torpedoed the storytelling, because part of the greatness of The Stand, and it's one of my favorite books, is the journey that you go on. And where are you going, who you're going to meet on the way. But no, it seems like ever since Lost, I think Lost began it in earnest. There was other examples of it before Lost, but Lost kind of injected it. I mean, the whole Alias Lost thing, it was a Bad Robot. Why am I not surprised that I blame Bad Robot for this? I think Bad Robot is pretty much, as far as a production company, is sometimes they've done things I like, but for the most part, all the ills of the world I'm going to lay directly on the front doorstep or the front stoop of Bad Robot. Certainly, but anyway, you know what I think about that. But this storytelling trope is terrible, and I think it completely ruined the approach to The Stand. And I didn't understand why they chose to go that route, which I think undermined the very story that was being told. Now, I've been thinking about this for a long time, and it's been something you heard me when The Stand first started dropping. I was going to review it all, and I hated the first episode so much, and then I just decided, you know what? I'm saving all of my, if I'm gonna be a hater, I'm gonna be a hater for one thing only, and that's gonna be modern Star Trek. That's what I'm gonna hate on, and you know that. But this storytelling trope, and you're gonna say, but Rob, what about your beloved Manifest? Manifest does the same shit, which is one of the reasons I hate Watch Manifest. That and its impossible premise. It has a premise that cannot be ever answered. The same way that Lost had an impossible premise. And when they finally answered what it was or what was going on, it still didn't tell you what the island was at all. I mean, I can't stand that either. But an impossible premise coupled with this kind of out-of-sequence storytelling makes me want to, I don't know, put a spoon in one of my eyeballs, scoop out my eyeball, and eat it for dinner. That's pretty much it. But there was an article that I want to thank Cal from Swack Props. If you go to his Etsy store, you can see his great work. Posted this article from Rolling Stone that was published yesterday. And I thought, my God, I didn't do a Robservations yesterday. Thank you for everybody who came for our Midnight Metal stream, which almost went for 4 hours and turned out to be quite fun. If you're asking, no, this is not going to be a regular thing. Midnight Metal is going to be whenever it happens. It's not going to be planned. Already it was I had two metal shows, and one was criticized already for being another Robservations. I don't know what's going to happen on those shows. Who knows? But, so don't plan on that every night. But they were fun, and everybody who was here, it was a rollicking time was had by all. But anyway, so this article dropped yesterday, and I figured, I'm going to get into it today, ladies and gentlemen. Let's do it. This article was published in Rolling Stone yesterday. Alan Sepinwall wrote it. Let's not do the time warp again. Netflix's The Serpent, HBO Max's Made for Love, and AMC's Gangs of London are among many recent series poisoned by the out-of-sequence storytelling trend. Amen, Alan, although I really do love Gangs of London. Here is his article. The remote seems to hang in the air for a moment, its infrared sensor mixing with the light coming in through the window to create a pixelated rainbow before the device crashes into the screen of my television. I lean back, satisfied that my rage has found a therapeutic outlet, then turn and look for other things to break. You're probably wondering how I got here. So let's flash back a few weeks earlier to explain. Or would it be better if I told my tale of TV critic woe in the proper order, rather than starting with a semi-exciting incident before rewinding to how things really began? Because a plague has descended upon the land of peak TV, one in which fractured timelines are sucking the life out of far too many stories. The idea of non-chronological storytelling itself is far from new to television. Seinfeld did an episode where the story ran backwards called The Betrayal, 3 years before Christopher Nolan's Memento hit theaters. 90s drama juggernaut ER eventually fell in love with the idea of starting episodes in the middle of a story, aka in medias res, and then going back several hours to illustrate how one of the heroic docs got into that sticky situation. Recently, though, the 24 hours earlier Chiron has gone from an occasional gimmick to what feels like the narrative default. Next week alone, 3 scripted series are premiering that use some variation of this device. HBO Max's Made for Love, Netflix's The Serpent, and AMC's Gangs of London. In fact, you'd be hard-pressed to identify any recently premiered series that didn't monkey with time a little versus naming the ones I did. Even shows made for preschoolers, like Netflix's City of Ghosts, can't resist it. So why, you may ask, is this a problem? Have I just become an old man who yells at clouds, or is it the children who are wrong? When used smartly, scrambled narratives, flashbacks and flash-forwards, parallel timelines, etc., can have incredible impact. 3 of the best drama pilots ever made, Alias, Lost, and Breaking Bad, use one or more of these devices and are vastly more exciting for it. Alias begins with a cinnamon-haired Sydney Bristow on the verge of being tortured by Chinese government officials, then bounces between that situation and the story of how she wound up cuffed to a chair, her teeth at risk of extraction. Lost, also from J.J. Abrams, though co-creator Damon Lindelof has played with time plenty in his later projects, starts moments after the crash of Oceanic 815, only later offering glimpses of the passengers in mid-flight. And Breaking Bad famously begins with Walter White in his underwear, recording a farewell video message to his family as he expects to die in a gunfight with police. Then the story dives into his pre-meth life. Those shows also continue to move backward and forward in time as needed throughout their runs, with Lost devoting an entire season to time travel and Breaking Bad teasing its series finale at the start of the previous season. So nonlinear narratives themselves aren't the issue. It's that too many people, both creators and executives, have looked at the shows that did it right and said, oh, that's easy. We can do it too. So what was once an occasional artisanal treat is now junk food so shoddy and mass-produced, you don't even get the initial sugar rush out of it. Several showrunners have told me that this is now a frequent note they get from network and studio bosses, especially on pilot episodes. One even claimed that agreeing to the note was the price of getting their show green-lit. With so many shows to choose from, everyone is afraid of losing the viewer's attention for even a second. So they've decided the simplest, surest way to prevent this is to jump past the boring exposition and present someone leaping through a plate glass window or robbing a bank while dressed as Angela Merkel, and only then properly introduce everybody. But very few creators are as talented as Vince Gilligan, who also uses a nonlinear framing device for each season of Breaking Bad spinoff Better Call Saul. So between the come-down and basic artistry and the sheer ubiquity of the device, what's meant to titillate, ooh, I can't wait to find out what that's about, instead aggravates. Oh, this again? What's particularly exasperating is when the flash-forward teasers aren't even that exciting to begin with. Nat Geo's The Right Stuff series opens with two of its astronauts competitively jogging, shaving, and eating breakfast before the story retreats 2 years into the past to begin the tale of how they came to so dislike each other. Opening in medias res in general betrays a lack of confidence in the material, but when you're starting up with guys crankily eating steak and eggs, you may as well give up. The showiness and overuse of starting in the middle can also have the unintended consequences of pulling the viewer out of the story. We know we're enjoying a fiction, but storytellers have to be very careful of how and how often they remind us of that. In the same way that Superman writers are generally better off not trying to explain why a pair of sunglasses are enough to conceal Clark Kent's identity. When you're keeping track of timelines and looking for clues on how the past and present will link up, you're not as focused on what the characters are feeling and experiencing in the moment you're actually watching. This is an even bigger problem for shows that rip apart their timelines beyond their opening scenes. The first season of True Detective did this beautifully, with glimpses of the middle-aged, ruined Russ Cole and Marty Hart providing both an emotional anchor and some narrative clarity for the flashback scenes about the case they worked together. More often, though, charting what timeline you're in and how it relates to the other ones becomes work that unplugs the viewer from the storytelling or the story that they're watching. Even when there's a thematic point to going non-linear, like how the first few seasons of Westworld were about both human and machines getting caught up in their own behavioral loops, the mental effort required almost always outweighs the spiritual reward. The action-packed British crime drama Gangs of London plays with time less aggressively than next week's other notable premieres, largely moving forward chronologically after a colorful in medias res murder scene to set the mood. Made for Love, a sci-fi comedy starring Kristen Milotti as a woman whose tech mogul husband implants a chip in her head to track her actions and thoughts, zigzags through the whole history of the ugly marriage and even before. The Serpent, about real-life serial killer Charles Sobrak, Tahar Rahim, preying on Western tourists traveling Asia's hippie trail in the 70s, dramatizes many crimes out of order, and in parallel with a chronological timeline where Dutch diplomat Herman Kippenberg and his wife Angela become amateur sleuths when the local authorities won't sufficiently investigate the murder of a pair of Dutch tourists. Made for Love at least gets some of the comic mileage by presenting events almost at random, and it fits with the idea of Melodi's character constantly revisiting her past to avoid thinking about her depressing present. The Serpent, though, undercuts itself at every turn by not moving in one direction. There are frequent chyrons to remind the viewer of exactly where they are in the story, but a whiteboard may be required to recall when certain events happen relative to others. Scenes are often presented multiple times from multiple perspectives in different episodes, in theory to provide new context to what we previously saw. Coupled with the killer's ritualized methods, he would poison his victims, making them sick enough to depend on him for everything. It makes the story feel more monotonous than intended. Nobody needs to see this many scenes of people writhing in intestinal discomfort. And while the nonlinear approach sometimes ups the suspense level, it mostly gets in the way. Jenna Coleman gives a strong performance as the killer. I can't pronounce his last name, that's why I'm just saying the killer. Girlfriend, Marie-Andre Leclerc, but how Leclerc evolves from unsuspecting love interest to semi-willing accomplice gets lost in all the shuffling. Eventually, the two timelines merge, with Herman and Angela making enough progress that the Serpent takes on an urgency befitting the atrocities committed by the killer. Those later chapters are so tense, exciting, and at times touching that the periodic rewinds don't get in the way too much. The question is, how many viewers will stick around for that payoff? The structure will feel familiar from a number of recent docuseries, such as The Vow or The Last Dance. In many cases, it feels like an attempt to hide the padding of a story that easily could have been told in half the time, if not less. This is a variation on the problem of so many series these days being feature-length film ideas that were simply expanded when they couldn't be sold to a movie studio. But a 10-hour movie presented in this convoluted way ultimately isn't any more satisfying than one that goes in order. I asked a writer who's worked on both shows that are chronological and shows that aren't about the proliferation of the nonlinear narrative. They said, You have to answer, why are you doing this? The device is generally more effective at revealing character than in concealing plot, this writer argued, and is best when the audience winds up in the same headspace as the character, like with poor Leonard with his short-term memory problems in Memento. Too many recent shows just go out of sequence for an initial jolt of adrenaline or to turn basic story points into mysteries, leaving the whole thing feeling at best like an empty exercise, at worst like an annoying rehash of tropes that half of television currently uses. When you think about it, the writer added, all stories start in media res, because even a story that begins with a character's birth is still coming in after their parents meet. Once upon a time, though, stories generally continued on from wherever they chose to begin, and that's happening much less often than it should. As I've watched a lot in media res openings over the last few years, I've frequently vented that if you can't tell your story chronologically in order, then you should find a different story to tell. That's obviously reductive thinking. I wouldn't want to see wholly linear versions of Memento or Breaking Bad or Pulp Fiction. Still, far too many series are unsticking themselves in time now and doing it poorly. This device has gone from rare and thrilling to a familiar and frustrating crutch, one that shows like the serpent keep tripping over. TV shows don't have to stay linear, but at this moment in time they need a really good reason not to, for the sake of my endangered TV screen, if nothing else. I love this article. I've been thinking the same thing for a long time. You know, it's just kind of a weird, to me, it's always kind of a weird trope to watch, because I feel more often than not that, like the author said, they are either covering up their lack of plot, and they're concealing things just for the sake of concealing them to make, I don't know, more compelling viewing, but it doesn't make for more compelling storytelling in a way. Like, okay, you're withholding information. It's kind of like when someone says, I really want to tell you something. I can't. And you're like, no, what? You can tell me. No. And it's that kind of thing. It's so annoying. And, then they finally tell you what, you finally pry it out of them, and it wasn't that big a deal anyway. But you're like, oh. But that moment when they weren't telling you, it's like, it's excruciating. And I feel that way with a lot of shows, and I hate it. I hate it, unless it's done, again, really, really, really well. And it was, I thought, in Lost. The only problem with Lost was Lost turned out to be the biggest audience betrayal in the history of television, because they really didn't know what they were doing. And they never, I always thought in my own mind, for instance, and maybe this was just me, I always thought that the island in Lost was sort of a crucible. In a way, it was God's thumbprint, and I'm not a religious person, but God can be just like God's a character in Battlestar Galactica, but you never see that person or entity or whatever, but you feel their presence through the angels, the head Baltar and head Six. But in Lost, I like the idea that the in my mind the island was like God's thumbprint on his creation, and that the people that go through the crucible of being on the island, anybody that finds their way to this island, whatever experience they have, and if they make it back to the real world, those people are supposed to bring about slowly. But once you've gone through the crucible of the island, you learn something about being human, and you go into the real world and presumably share whatever that thing is, whether it makes you a better person and you're enlightening the lives of those around you or something. But there was no reason. At the end of the day, they didn't know what the island was, why there was a giant golden butt plug in the bottom of the island. They didn't know anything about that, and I hated it for it. After I was so into Lost, and when I got to the end, I'm like, I hate all of you people. You people have betrayed me. You betrayed the storytelling of your show, and basically you've let down the entire planet. But that's okay. I didn't feel that way ever again until the last 3 episodes of Game of Thrones, which literally, to me, destroyed the entire series. I love Game of Thrones, but I have no reason to ever go back and watch it, because half the things that you're following along, like, they don't add up to anything. And I've never seen that before, but anyway, what does that have to do with what we're talking about? Nothing. I'm going off on a tangent. But I just can't stand this form of storytelling, and I felt that it really ruined The Stand. And that bothered me. I wanted to love The Stand. I went in wanting to love it. And I I don't like being cast adrift when I'm watching something that I like. It bums me out. Anyway, what do you guys have to say? I don't know. I don't know, but I'm going to delve into these letters today and find out, because it's been a day. You know what? I'm going to start with Cinema Gulp. Cinema Gulp is here, and Cinema Gulp says, Cinema Gulp, hello, Rob and fellow PGS members. This Friday is a huge day for me, Rob. One of the things that has always meant the most to me is returning to my life. After over 1 year of its absence, I took a long, retrospective look back at my history with it. From where it all began to how it shaped different phases of my life to how it has made me who I am today. Most importantly, I reflected on all of the joy it has given me in my 43 years of life and how it's one of those rare things that has never let me down. My only recollections and memories are all positive ones, Rob, so let me indulge myself and take you and the Post-Geek Singularity down this very special rabbit hole, a special place in my life known as movie theaters. I'm going to get all weepy. It all stems back to 1982, where I vividly remember my mother taking my brother and I to a daytime showing of E.T. at the Orange Cinedome in Ocean City, or Orange County, California. Standing in line and then eventually making it up to the box office before seeing the sprouting figure of a young, smiling ticket taker was a thing of wonder for my 5-year-old self. I don't remember a lot from my early childhood, so let's call this my first significant memory. Instantaneously, the sounds of the carbonated CO2 mixing perfectly with the Pepsi-Cola syrup blasted into my ears as the celestial scent of hot, buttery popcorn popped into the giant trough behind the concession booth, creating a grand mountain of what I now call movie corn. My mom had my brother take my hand as she ordered a large popcorn, Milk Duds for herself, Reese's Pieces for us, and a large soft drink to share. As we made our way into the theater, I remember my vision being blocked by a family walking in front of us. Finally, when the family found their row and moved out of my front view, my entire world changed. The size of this theater was magnificent for such a young pup, and my eyes surveilled the entire room. I had officially entered my first movie theater. The Cinedome was built in a large parking structure back in 1969. The theater was unique in that its two main auditoriums were large domes, featuring 863 seats each and large curved screens. For the time, this was unheard of in Orange County. We made our way to our seats, and I immediately felt the brisk breeze from up above the ceiling AC units. I remember it being a fairly hot June afternoon, so this sensation was welcome. We were a few minutes early, and back then the screens at the Cinedome showed movie trivia while waiting for the main feature to start. I loved watching people in their little groups read the questions out loud and all try and figure out the answer. This may seem trivial and goofy to some younger folks, but to me, this was part of the movie-going experience of my youth. It created camaraderie amongst the theater goers and got the imagination fueled before the start of the flick. Nowadays, people just stare at their phones while endless commercials play until the start of the dozen or so trailers. I realize times have changed, but this was always a special time for me as I waited for the picture to start. But listen to me, now I'm just sounding like a get-off-my-lawn guy. When the lights began to dim, the screen went black, and the music that was playing softly faded. The screen came up to what my brothers swear to this day was the Return of the Jedi trailer. But I honestly don't recall, so maybe someone in the PGS can fact-check that. And well, since we were there to see E.T., the rest is in the history books. From that moment on, the movie theater was my sanctuary. Growing up in elementary school, I quickly became the movie guru amongst my tight little group of friends and would write stories for all of us to act out on our friends' parents' newly purchased large handheld VHS camera. As time went on, my older cousin would take my brother and I to the Cinedome to see movies that, let's just say, we probably shouldn't have been in. At such a young age, I remember getting to see the first 2 Beverly Hills Cop movies, the first 2 Lethal Weapon movies, The Lost Boys, and my most memorable movie-going experience, even to this day, Aliens, all at the Cinedome. Sadly, the Cinedome was closed forever in the fall of 1999, but I had since left it behind, having moved further south in Orange County. As time went on and I started high school, I had adopted 2 new theaters that were both within walking distance from my house in Lake Forest. So many more, too many to mention in this letter, experiences took place in those theaters. my freshman year of high school during a late Saturday screening of Bram Stoker's Dracula at the El Toro 5 is where I had my first ever makeout session with a girl in a movie theater. How are you making out with a girl watching Dracula, bruh? I remember every detail about that one, but I'll leave it there. I saw two of my all-time favorite films, True Romance and Strange Days, at the El Toro. The Saddleback 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6 were a two-partition movie theater that played the G through PG-13 rated movies in the 1, 2, 3, and the R-rated movies in the 4, 5, 6. I saw Deep Rising, From Dusk Till Dawn, Jackie Brown, Ed Wood, Army of Darkness, and T2 in these theaters. Did you stay through the credits of Army of Darkness? Because I have a screen credit. This brings me to the memory of the first time I cried in a movie theater. Not necessarily the first time I cried during a movie, and certainly not the first time in life, but the first time seated in an actual movie theater. It was December of 1997. The movie was Titanic. Fresh out of high school, and the girl who I was in love with had just moved away to college a few months prior. I didn't know the impact this story of love at first sight and then loss would have on me. I bawled like a baby in this one. Toward the last act of the film, as the story reached its climactic tragedy, many thoughts ran through my head. Why couldn't I be the hero that saved the girl? Do I have it in me to make the sacrifice? Can I be as good-willed and strong as Jack was? Silly questions to contemplate now as a 43-year-old man, but then it was all relevant. This is what the theater-going experience does to us. To be truly enveloped and taken in by the sights, the sounds, the characters, and the story is a gift that a true moviegoer never deprives themselves of. To me, there's nothing like going to the movies. I could go on and on about all the other films I was fortunate enough to see in the theater, but it would literally take all day, and this letter is already too long. Having got my 2 vaccine shots completed back in early February, and hearing the news recently that theaters are once again attempting to reopen, I felt that I wanted to share with you what it means to me to sit in a theater, completely still, completely silent, no phone, no internet, no outside interference of any kind, completely engaged, and just feel what the filmmaker intended me to feel. This is what I am grateful for at this moment. If the stars align for me, I will be sitting in a theater this Friday, movie corn in hand, watching Godzilla vs. Kong, totally uninterrupted from the loud noise of the outside world. I do not take it for granted that I was able to get the vaccine so early. The type of job I have allows me this, but for myself, and for everyone who loves the movie theater going experience the way I do, whether I like the movie or not, I will enjoy every waking moment of having the privilege of once again returning to the movie theater, my true sanctuary, my real home away from home. Thank you, Rob, and everything you do, sir. When all of this is behind us and the theaters get back open to the best shape they can be in, I hope to bump into you at the TCL Chinese or ArcLight one day. Until then, live long and prosper. Cinema. P.S. Please check out this parody video I directed that combines the film Office Space with the Avengers, entitled Infinity Space. Well, I will do that. Here is Infinity Space for you in the live chat. Cinema Gulp, what a lovely letter. You were making me misty-eyed there. So there's the film Infinity Space in the live chat, so you can check it out. I feel the same way. I mean, I am with you. You and I park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay, sir. I felt that way since I was a kid, too. I'm a little older than you, but probably about a decade older than you, I think. But the summer of 1982 was a very heady time. I was a teenager. I think in 82 I was 15, maybe 14, 15. And from May to the end of June, we've talked about it a lot, but you had, in this 2 months period of time, you had, Blade Runner and John Carpenter's The Thing opened on the same day in June. Sophie's Choice, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, or Poltergeist, both opened on June 4th. It wasn't really a Sophie's Choice for me. I went and saw Wrath of Khan 4 times opening day, and I went and saw Poltergeist the next day on June 5th. E.T., Tron, The Road Warrior had its American release in that period of time. And, I remember thinking, because I was going to the movies so often, and every movie delivered, Tron, it's so funny. People talk about, well, Tron's not that good of a movie, but nothing looks like Tron. Still to this day, when you watch Tron, it's like, wow, nothing looks like this movie, not even Tron Legacy. And it was just the diversity. Conan the Barbarian was the first time, I think, a fantasy film really cooked on the big screen, where Basil Polidoris' score, John Milius's hard-hitting direction, James Earl Jones' Thulsa Doom, and of course, Arnie as Conan, and Sandal Bergman from all that jazz. I mean, that whole summer really solidified in me. I had already wanted to make movies. I already wanted to go and work in the movie business. I had started working in video stores when I was 13 in 1980, and that was in a big transitional moment. There were no video stores back then. I worked at one of the very first video stores in the United States, which was Video Space, and the boss, the man who founded it, Weston Nishimura, actually founded the Video Software Dealers Association of America, which became a big, powerful organization. I don't think it exists anymore, but it was a big deal. And so movie theaters, to me, I think the first time that I remember being in a movie theater, like the way you described when you saw E.T., for me it was when I love movies, but it wasn't until I was 9 and saw Logan's Run. And I went opening night. My mom took me opening night. I've told the story here before, but I'll tell it again. It was at the John Dance Theater, where I later went on to see movies like Superman the Movie and Star Trek the Motion Picture. But the John Dance Theater seemed like it was huge. And it was a giant single-screen, big-box theater. I mean, I want to say it had 1,500 screens in it. It doesn't exist anymore, so I can't. I've always wanted to go back because, when you're a kid, things seem so much bigger. But this theater was, like, vast. And I remember we go to see Logan's Run, and it was the first time I was really anticipating a movie. I mean, I anticipated Jaws, but it wasn't the same. Like, Jaws was a movie, it took me a long time to be able to see Jaws because it was the year before, and nobody wanted to take us, and so it was really exciting to go, but it was more like, it was different. Jaws was more of this cultural event that I felt like I was missing out on, but Logan's Run was a movie I anticipated. I didn't really anticipate Jaws. I knew it had come out, but I didn't know what it was. Little did I know. I went and saw that at the Coliseum Theater in downtown Seattle, but seeing it at the John Dance was something I waited for. And it was one of those movies where, when they're going through the Love Shop, I'm 9, and the movie seemed so huge, and it was so, I was done. I'm like, movie theaters, this is the greatest thing ever, and that's when I really started to pay more attention to movies. And that year we had things like King Kong, the De Laurentiis King Kong, and then of course Star Wars a year later. But I was hooked. Logan's Run is what did it for me. And what a great letter. Thanks for writing that in. This is a good one. Regis K writes in and says, "Hi Rob and fellow imagination connoisseurs. I heard rumors about Marvel introducing Isaiah Bradley in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Yes, they did in the second episode." From a Screen Rant article, the character of Isaiah Bradley was introduced in Robert Morales' groundbreaking miniseries Truth, Red, White, and Black back in 2003. He was inspired by the infamous Tuskegee study, in which African Americans were secretly exposed to syphilis, and proposed a plot to Marvel in which they revealed secret soldier experiments on black soldiers during World War II. In the comics, Isaiah Bradley was a conscientious objector who was forced to participate in the Second World War. Assigned to a black regiment, he and his fellow soldiers were spirited away by military intelligence and subjected to super soldier experiments. Bradley was one of a handful who survived, and he and his unit served their country well, although they never received the honor and acclaim of Steve Rogers because of the color of their skin. In the end, Isaiah's frustration boiled over, and he stole Captain America's costume for a single mission. This act led to his court-martial and imprisonment at Leavenworth, where he served 17 years in solitary confinement. Although he was ultimately freed by President Eisenhower, his mind had deteriorated, in part due to the serum and in part due to his imprisonment, and he never recovered. I wondered if the MCU would be bold enough to explore such deep issues as experimentation on black subjects, like in the real-life Tuskegee experiment, and how the government treats those it perceives as second-class citizens. Frankly, I was a bit skeptic Marvel would, but oh boy did they, and they went there. They went there full force. doubling the fact with a very apropos police confrontation, the likes of which we've seen too many times with black athletes and other famous figures. Sam gave back the shield because he does not think people will accept a black Captain America. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier did not, to this point, generate the same kind of discussion and speculation as WandaVision, because unlike WandaVision, it's not based on a particular comic storyline like House of M or The Vision and Scarlet Witch dealing with Wanda's twins. But now that it has found its voice, that of prejudice, I believe it will. I have to hand it to Marvel. Between that and the issue of grief pictured in WandaVision, the MCU is getting seriously deep to my great delight. Not that I don't like lighter stories, I do, but I'm so happy we're finally addressing this kind of subject matter. Surely it will not be the taste of those who think superhero movies should only produce mindless adventures, but as well as I understand, it is this exactly what the series should focus on. This is the MCU I like. Witty, light, sometimes superficial, but also serious and deep. We are ready. The MCU is ready. Let's not be afraid. Let's get on with the heavy stuff. Regis K. You know what, Regis? I've got to tell you, when they introduced Isaiah Bradley, like I couldn't believe it. I didn't know where Bucky was taking Sam, and I'm like, oh my God. And this is why, there's a lot of people I've seen. There's not a lot of enthusiasm for Falcon and the Winter Soldier. They're talking about how it sucks or whatever. I'm like, are we watching the same show? Because I'm completely immersed in it. I thought what they were doing with U.S. Agent and with Watts, Wyatt Russell. I thought Watts. Why did I say that? And what they're doing there was really interesting. And the idea that they went down the Isaiah Bradley route. I mean, I read that comic, back in 2003, and it was pretty, damning stuff. And the fact that they're going there, and I think, yes, is it a little on the nose when the cops show up? It is. And sort of interesting that it's Bucky who then gets apprehended and taken to jail. But I really thought that was really interesting. And if we're going to find out and they're going to delve more into that, it's pretty intense. And I once again, I've got to hand it to Kevin Feige and Louis D'Esposito and Victoria Alonso, the group over at Marvel, and of course, the showrunners for Falcon and Winter Soldier for actually going there. And I think that once again, they don't exactly recreate the storylines of the comics, but they take the best ideas from the comics and they use them. And I thought this was, there's a lot going on in this show, and I'm there for it. I think it's really great. I'm glad you liked it as well. I think if you're going to deal with issues, there's ways to do it where you don't have to be all, I guess, woke. While I guess people could level the criticism that this is too woke for them, I don't think it is. I mean, I think it's going into things that are absolutely exactly where they should be dealt with and how they should be dealt with. I think this is really, really interesting, and I can't wait. I'm sorry it's only 6 episodes, man, because I can't wait to see where it goes, but I'm really enjoying it a lot. Really enjoying it a lot. Thanks for writing in. This comes from Julian Torres. Julian Torres says, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, a show for one world, but one people, Americans. Hello, Rob. I've been a fan of you for at least a couple of years, and this is the first time I've sent a letter. I wish it were different circumstances. I wish I had finally decided to rant about my favorite book series or to send a love letter to this community and what it means to me. I'll leave that for a better time, perhaps. Right now, I'm motivated by a dreadful expectation of what may be on the horizon for my favorite franchise. Spoiler alert, this will get slightly political, and just to be as transparent as possible, I want to give a disclaimer from where I come from and where I stand. I'm a 24-year-old guy from Argentina. So right off the bat, you can take everything I say about American politics with a grain of salt. It's secondhand knowledge. I don't consider myself affiliated with any party. Philosophically, I'm a libertarian. I've been told by some U.S. friends that libertarianism in the U.S. isn't exactly how it is in Argentina. So basically what I mean is that my core value is to live with unrestricted respect for the life project of others. I'm a true believer in individual responsibility, and thus I'm against the tribalism agenda that postmodernist neo-Marxist thought is pushing, particularly in Argentina. But I'm no stranger to what happens in Europe and the US. Your ethnicity, your sexuality, your political views, it's all part of your identity, but I don't think it defines you. The individual is always what defines a person rather than the group they belong to. Totally agree with you. So now that you know where I stand, allow me to talk about how disappointed I was with the second episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier and where I hope this doesn't lead to. It started off great. I was happy to see that the U.S. agent isn't just a MAGA cap, as the internet calls him. He genuinely seemed to be a guy that earned the chance to be a hero, and he has an honest desire to help. We've had scenes where he's alone with his close friends and alone with the Flag Smasher leader, so it's safe to assume that he's not pretending to be good. That's actually who he is, and I thought that was a good first step. The banter between Bucky and Sam was, okay. Don't get me wrong, I love seeing Avengers interacting, and both of their characters are super fun and endearing. I don't know, I think it was a bit rushed. Not a problem, just an asterisk. But then, ooh boy, the show went full into politics, and that threw me off so hard I had to rewatch some scenes to pay attention to the plot. Some people pointed out that in the first episode that Sam talked about needing heroes for this time. I decided to ignore the meta-context. I told myself he was talking about the post-blip world. I didn't want to believe that it was social commentary that has been unfortunately very present in both Marvel and DC Comics, the idea that the legacy heroes are inadequate for these current times, privileged white men that don't represent the world we live in. Their ideals of equality of opportunity and justice aren't relevant anymore. The new role of superheroes, at least from my analysis of recent comics and superhero properties, is to not be an aspirational figure, not the mythical demigod that teaches us a lesson about the human condition, but rather a shallow casket that everyone can see themselves in. But not on a moral or ethical level, no. It needs to represent their race, their sexuality, their political views. Except, of course, the bad political views. We can't have those, can we? It's so strange. I'm from Argentina, Rob. Do you know the only Argentinian superhero I know of in Marvel and DC? Defensor from Contest of Champions #1 in 1982. He wears a colonial-style magical armor from the Spaniards that was left in Argentina after the colonization. He fights paramilitary forces in Argentina, has a Spanish name, but later introduces himself to be from Brazil. Oh well, guess I wasn't that well represented after all. And yet I never cared for that. I looked at Captain America. America for us South Americans is not the U.S., but rather the whole continent, so that's a bit of a cultural appropriation, Chief. And I identified with his ideals. Despite living on the edge of poverty my whole life, I looked at Tony Stark and admired him for his intellect and audacity. Hell, I love the Silver Surfer, and I can't even surf. I don't want Marvel to give me an Argentinian Antonio Stark. I don't need Marvel to give me a bisexual superhero to feel validated. I just want good stories and good archetypical characters. You can't represent everyone. There's an infinite amount of categorizations humans can fall into. One day, it won't be enough with a gay character. It'll have to be an asexual, aromantic South American and trans in order for someone that falls into that box to feel represented. Representation should come in the form of universal values that are common to the human race. Diversity definitely includes people from different ethnicities, but it's not enough to look different. Diversity should come in the form of contrarian views of the world that clash with the established heroes, give new perspectives, but can coexist. Again, universal values. That's a true representation, at least in my opinion. Because then we have the second episode of The Falcon and Winter Soldier, and let me tell you, no one but a particular group of people in the U.S. can relate. Sam calling out Bucky for telling him what his rights were felt so out of touch. They fought an intergalactic army of aliens together. Bucky was saved and taken care of by the wealthiest, most technologically advanced society in the world, which was located in Africa, and they were all black. Is Sam implying that Bucky talked to him from a place of privilege? Look, I think there could be something there given Bucky's timeline. What if he had old-fashioned values? But that's not the story they're telling. Bucky said he had no right giving up Steve's shield, his best friend's shield, by the way, and Sam immediately called him out for historical institutional racism, as if Bucky himself was responsible for that. Then we had the introduction of Isaiah Bradley, which I was so excited for, but it only seemed to be there to introduce Patriot for the Young Avengers, and so Sam could lash out at Bucky because the U.S. government decided to hide the identity of a black superhero. Well, Sam, the U.S. wasn't also very open about having an Ant-Man and a Wasp, were they? The idea that it was racial segregation is ridiculous, in my estimation. Maybe I'm wrong. I would love to hear why this makes more sense in universe. But then the scene that broke me was when the two cops decided to profile Sam and almost arrest him for being black. I'm not going to get into the verisimilitude of the cop not recognizing two Avengers. I want to focus on the fact that this scene, to be frank, makes everyone outside of the U.S. feel detached from the plot. There's racism everywhere because bad people will sprout on every land. I'm not saying the rest of the world is without its race issues. What I am trying to say is that this show, 1/3 of its run gone, seems more preoccupied to reflect the racial issues of the U.S. rather than telling a global and universal story that everyone can relate to, no matter who they are or where they come from. In fact, if you're white, the show tells you that you shouldn't have a say on what's right for a character to do. I know this may sound very privileged of me, asking an American production to be less American and more universal, but it's not about that. I think it's more than fair for science fiction and fantasy to draw in social issues from the real world and address them. My question is, are they being addressed in a way that everyone can relate to? Is it a universal tale of acceptance, or is it just almost a caricature of how the left sees institutional racism in America? To be honest, the things that bother me most is the approach. It's not subtle at all, and again, presented in a very specific way for a very specific group of people to relate to. How does an Asian person react to it? How does a European react to it? I can't speak for all Hispanics, but my international friends and I agreed that this is not a story meant for us. It doesn't seem to have us in mind at all. We can't relate to Sam's journey because the show actively makes it about tribalism. We're not part of the group. We would never understand. And the saddest part is that the Flag Smashers would be a better way to explore this. They want a world without borders, without nations, mankind working together. The theme there is quite universal. That is indeed something we can all relate to, something we can all explore. Some might say that that's the point. Sam's journey is showing us how fractured the world, the U.S., is, to contrast, and so we can see the point in the Flag Smashers. I have to assume that it is. But in my opinion, they went too far on the exposition of the American race issues and the antagonization between races. We live in the era of globalization and the internet where we're all connected. They know this show is being streamed around the world, and different cultures and societies are watching. More than ever, the need for global, universal themes that transcend time and place should be the focus, something we can all relate to, something we can all think about to apply to our lives and become better people. And yet, I sense the invisible hand of representation and intersectionalism making its way into the story to drive it away from the universal themes and make it about American politics. I'm not naive enough to think that last year's events had no influence on this, and that's slightly saddening in my opinion. I'm still going to watch the rest of the show. I hope to be proven wrong, that I'm missing a point or I'm being too cynical or insensitive. If I am, I'd like to be called out. Like I said at the beginning, maybe I'm too detached from these sensitive issues. I just feel like the story is less about a lesson for all humans and more of a call out to certain groups of people to change their ways. Much love, Rob. Keep up the great work. Wow, Julian, fantastic letter. I'm constantly blown away by the level of thoughtfulness of some of the people that write letters. I am with you 100% here. America is so far up its own ass about our own ideas of racism, intersectionalism, and all that we tend to forget the rest of the world doesn't see these things the way we do. And I'm with you. I think, look, it was a bit heavy-handed. I mean, going into Isaiah Bradley is really interesting. I thought they would, go more into that. Where did the super soldier serum come from? Did Zemo make more of it? We're going to find out, I guess. But, it didn't really bother me that there was the scene with the police car and all of that. I thought that in a way they brought up the idea of racial profiling, but then sort of turned it on its ear when it was Bucky that gets arrested. But I'm with you there. These are very American issues. We act like depending on what country you are in the world, there's all kinds of. I mean, you go to Asia, the racism against Asian cultures against other Asian cultures is something that's almost completely foreign to us, even though we have our own issues, clearly. But I think you're absolutely right. And I think our call it, well, like you said, political left-leaning politics is being injected to all of our entertainment and programming, and especially when you're dealing with comic book characters, the universality of it is being kind of swept aside. But I think you're absolutely right. I think everything you wrote about in this letter is absolutely correct. That Sam and Bucky, as you said, fought an alien army. You know, the idea that they're gonna, but I think you can't bring in a character like Isaiah Bradley and not bring up some of these issues. Because this kind of racism, what happened with the Tuskegee, the whole inspiration for where that character came from in the Truth miniseries, really an unfortunate chapter in our nation's history. And because we had things explode, I don't have a problem with making things a bit topical. And I think in the particular story that they're telling, I think it works. I'm hoping that as the story moves along, that we're going to see a more universal narrative develop. But I think your point is well taken. We in America, we tend to forget that all of the things and all of our woke culture does not always translate around the rest of the world. We are going to be, as we move forward, Americans are going to have to deal with the fact that the world, specifically China basically went up and bought Africa when we weren't paying any attention. Mineral rights, they're building infrastructure all over the continent. They're building all kinds of infrastructure in Europe. We sort of gave up on that. And we've been asleep at the wheel as far as I'm concerned. And we're going to have to deal with that in the future. And all of our, we seem to be, we're very navel-gazing now here in America. And I think you're absolutely right about how we tend to forget there's a big bad world out there. And that big bad world is not exactly worried about the left thinking that's taken over our institutes of higher learning and all of that, that it isn't the same all around the world. And I think your letter was a great illustration of that. So thank you for writing in. What a great letter. You guys are killing it today, man. This comes from E.T. Otero. E.T. Otero. Dear Rob, I have been meaning to write this letter for a while now. It's my first time writing in, but I've been watching for a few months. First of all, I want to say I'm a huge fan. Well, thank you. As far as YouTubers go, I find the most value from your channel. Oh, that's very nice of you to say. The reason I'm writing this letter, however, might come off as a bit weird. Nah. For as long as I can remember, I've suffered from obsessive-compulsive disorder. Contrary to popular belief, the disorder is not about being tidy and neat, as my house can attest to. It's not about things being just right. It's not about checking the stove or the door millions of times, though I've been there, done that. Instead, at its core, it is a misfire of the amygdala. I don't know how to pronounce that word. Amygdala? The small almond-shaped part of my brain, which I have to thank for keeping me alive for the past 30 years. I haven't died even once, so I have a good streak going on, in my opinion. This glitch in the matrix of my mind makes it so that things are sometimes perceived as threats when they're really not. Most times, the alarms going on inside my brain make no logical sense, but within the throes of the fight-or-flight response my entire body goes through in these situations, no amount of rationality makes a difference. Thus, I'm forced to teach my brain what a real threat is as opposed to an OCD perceived one by ignoring said false alarms, even as my entire being is under attack by an onslaught of the physiological and psychological anxiety-producing reactions that come with them. Otherwise, not only does it continue to happen, but it also gets worse. Needless to say, it fucking sucks. The severity of the condition ebbs and flows over time, but sometimes it strikes particularly hard. One of those times began a few months ago. I have very little in terms of words to describe how shitty the whole thing was. Moreover, being a U.S. Navy sailor serving abroad added a few more issues to deal with. I just can't stop doing my job, which I'm pretty good at, if I do say so myself, so I was faced with juggling a debilitating mental condition with military duties, work, training, etc., And of course, whatever semblance of personal life remained amidst the pandemic shitstorm going on. Training my brain to respond effectively to the triggers and obsessions that come with the disorder was the only thing I could do, and I couldn't afford failure. So I began therapy, started taking medication, and listening to podcasts in order to learn how best tackle the situation. That last one can also do more harm than good sometimes, but I digress. I have a solid support system back home, especially my best friend from back in my college days and military veteran, but this all takes time, and in the process, I needed to survive it, figuratively speaking. I have to say that when the shit was hitting the fan the hardest, there was one thing I could always count on to help me through it all. That was your channel. There's something about the way you do your thing, man. Listening to your show always helped me stay grounded and kept me going forward through the OCD fuckery. I also love your insight and points of view within the industry, so besides helping me relax, you taught me many things as well. Another thing that I love is the joie de vivre with which you approach the mere experience of life. And you have certain open-mindedness that, especially in today's social, political, and cultural climate, is nothing short of inspiring. That, I think, is my most favorite aspect of watching your channel and one of the things that helped me the most. It always brightens my day. All of this to say, thank you, Rob. You have no idea how much you've helped me through the last few months, and I wish I could know of a way to repay you. This letter is the best repayment I could ever get, trust me. Maybe I'll send you a hot toy sometime. I want you to know that your channel brings more value than just the industry knowledge and entertainment you provide every time you Robcast at us. In my case, it served as therapy and a much-needed haven when I was going through tough shit. I'm currently feeling much better. The storm has passed, but I'll still watch your show and will continue to do so moving forward. Thanks again to you, the moderators, and the entire Post-Geek Singularity community, and I wish you all the best in your endeavors. When I'm a middle-aged man with one foot in the grave, as you like to say, I hope I'll be half as cool as you. E.T. Atero. P.S. Dota Dragon's Blood is dope, and I squealed like a fangirl when I saw your name, even though I already knew it was going to be there. You know, E.T., it seems so cliche to say, but when I get letters like this, you know, because sometimes I wonder, to be honest, I'm like, you know, what does this do to me professionally? Like, if I'm going in to, say, pitch a project or I want to work on something, do people look at me as a moron because I do this show? Like, I wonder about that. And sometimes I wrestle with the fact that, like, when I'm doing, like last night, I was, drinking, and we did almost a 4-hour show for fucking Metal Man, Midnight Metal, and I do that, and I'm like, what does that look like to the outside world? Like some middle-aged man with one foot in the grave, like, what's he doing? Reliving his youth? I do worry about that, and I'm like, I mean, I do this show basically because I'm having fun. It's fun for me, I feel it is worthwhile, and in a way, I've always wanted to be a storyteller, and now for me, it's a way to connect with other people, and I've met so many people, and I hear from people like yourself, like it's really hard for me to understand that me talking into there's a little green light right there that I'm talking into. I mean, there's nobody around here. It's just, I wonder, am I connecting? Is anybody watching this show? Like, I can look right now, and it says 412 concurrent viewers. So right now, as we watch this, there's 412 people watching this show. And I know from all over the world. And sometimes I wonder, why do they watch this show? What are they doing? Where are they watching this show? And I don't know. And when I hear about your situation, and when other people have written letters to me like yours, I'm constantly blown away and humbled at what you have to say. Like, I'm just serious. Yeah, man, look, Greenland's on Blu-ray. Woohoo! I can't wait. I really can't wait to watch this movie. I can't believe I haven't watched it all the way through. I'm dying to see it, and I really am. It is not an act. So it is nice to know that my joie de vivre is something people can respond to. But what a great letter. You do not have to send me a hot toy. But if I'm just kidding. But getting a letter from you like this it's all the reward in the world. I mean, you couldn't, whatever present you bought me, it would mean less to me than this letter that you just wrote in. And to me, that's the best part. I mean, the best part of this is having this community, having the moderators that do the great job that they do, and that people are responding. And I think that that's what more can you ask for? And another thing too is, I've met so many other people in the YouTube space. I like streaming with other people. I've met a lot of really cool people that I don't think I normally would have met in life. And I think all the people that I've met with or stream with on YouTube have also, in a way, they've certainly enriched my life. And I have a lot of new friends out of it. And I think they're genuine friends because we're sort of bonded by what we like and the things that our mutual interests. And that's been a byproduct that I was not, it didn't occur to me that was something that was going to happen. Let's see. Sky writes in. Sky says, "Oh no. I don't know if I should read this." Sky says, "Rob, I did it. I saw Godzilla versus Kong." You know what, Sky? I'm going to save this letter. I'm going to save it for 6 days. I promise I will come back to this letter. Yeah. You'll know why when I read it, all you people out there watching, all you 411 people now. Amir Riemann writes in and says, "Hey Rob, big fan of yours, and I always try watching your show and John's. This is my first letter to you, and apologies in advance if it's too long. I watched the Snyder Cut, and I just had to put some of my thoughts down in writing. I love the DC characters and Justice League comics, but I was disappointed with Snyder's movie. Please bear with me as I give a few of my biggest gripes. Firstly, the aesthetics of Snyder's world do nothing for me. In fact, they turn me off. At times, it was like watching an animated movie with the sky and the clouds looking the way they did. When he made 300, it was a unique visual spectacle, but to make every superhero movie with the same visual style just doesn't work for me. And yes, the world he's created is visually far too dark. It doesn't fill one with joy when they open up the curtains in the morning and see a cloudy, gloomy day outside, and yet that's exactly how Snyder's DC world looks. The DC superheroes already feel more otherworldly than their MCU counterparts, in my opinion. For example, Captain America, Spider-Man, and Iron Man exist in a world that we know, i.e. New York City. But the DC heroes live in entirely fictitious cities like Gotham, Metropolis, Central City, etc. And that's one of the reasons that I feel from a movie perspective, audiences are able to connect more to the MCU world because it's more real. So if you then go and add to that an extra layer of Snyder's animated, super stylized visual world, well, then it's just harder for audiences to like and connect with that cinematic world. Now, I really enjoyed the action in the Snyder Cut. It was very well executed. However, in terms of the story, I just didn't feel like there were any real stakes. There was never any real threat to the Earth or the heroes, and the movie didn't engage me at all. This is entirely because he made Superman the central character and theme of the Snyderverse, and it highlights why Superman is such a difficult character to write on screen. He is the definitive Mary Sue. From the end of Batman v Superman, we know that Superman is still alive or on the way to being resurrected because we saw the dust rising off of his coffin. So the inference was Superman lives. So then we move on to Snyder's Justice League, and for the very first thing we see of the DCEU is big bad Darkseid. He's getting his ass handed to him, and this was obviously without any help from Superman. So, okay, you could argue that it was a young Darkseid, but for me that changes nothing. Uxus, by the way. The result is the same. The first time I see the DCEU ultimate bad guy, he loses in battle and retreats. As a result, Darkseid never has any real presence on screen, unlike Thanos, who has a genuine presence, and the first time we really see Thanos in action is when he's laying the smackdown on the Hulk. Very good point. Very good point. Now we fast forward, and the movie makes it clear that the new attack on Earth and search for the Mother Boxes is happening only because Superman had died. And that's when it completely loses any sense of genuine stakes because we know that Superman is alive. So we're just waiting for Superman to come back and kick Steppenwolf's arse. It's bad storytelling. This is exemplified by the I'm not impressed scene, which I know a lot of people found really cool, but it just made me yawn because it proves Superman is the ultimate Mary Sue. Even the nightmare future where Superman has turned evil doesn't really excite me because, well, I know he's just being controlled by Darkseid, so eventually he's going to snap out of it and save the day. Lastly, I wanted to mention that I think it was a mistake to make a DCEU team-up movie without having done the proper groundwork with individual character movies first. I agree that it is possible to make a good team-up movie without individual movies first, but I still think these superheroes needed their own movies first, and the Snyder Cut proves my point. One of the most lauded aspects of the Snyder Cut is that at 4 hours long, it gives the characters room to breathe and for the audience to connect with them more, and I agree. However, that also proves that we would have been far more invested in these characters had we known about them before the team-up movie. And as a result, everything would have felt much more earned. For example, things that happen in the Avengers movies, I Am Iron Man, do generally carry a sense of weight and meaning because those moments are earned over the preceding films. Similarly, in the first Avengers movie, when Iron Man, Cap, and Loki are on the plane, and then we hear the thunder, we suddenly have a heightened sense of anticipation because we've already spent time with Thor in his film. That moment would have felt totally different had we not seen the first Thor movie beforehand. But Justice League carries none of that. I know that a lot of DCEU fans loathe any mention of the MCU blueprint, but what Kevin Feige did does work, and I think Warner Brothers should have reconsidered their Justice League plan. Anyway, I've rambled on long enough. This is I hope my first letter wasn't too long or boring. Keep up the good work, Rob. You have at least one fan here in Qatar, or Qatar. How do you pronounce it correctly? And more, I'm sure. Amir. Well, Amir, you know what? Great letter. I think all of your points are very well taken. And you're absolutely right. Once you see at the beginning, is it Ares? Is it Ares or Zeus? I think it's Ares who buries his axe in Darkseid, and Darkseid has to be carried off the battlefield. I think you're right. And I do think that Darkseid's villainy was undermined by doing that. I mean, they could be driven off the planet, but did Darkseid himself have to suffer such a wound? But I don't disagree with anything you've said. Now, because I've read so many comic books over my lifetime, and there's been so many different iterations I've experienced, I just kind of go with it as Zack Snyder's iteration. I'm sure that Matt Reeves' Batman already looks different than the Snyderverse, at least from the trailers that we've seen. It looks much more real world. And Aquaman, the film, was such a hell's a poppin' fantasy explosion of chewy, creamy, caramely goodness. And that was very different from what we'd seen in Zack Snyder's iteration, that I think that there's room for everything to exist. But this is the end. I really do believe this is the end of the Snyderverse. And I think, in a way, it kind of should be. Snyder's got his Man of Steel trilogy out of the way. And I think your points about Superman being, we know he's coming back, and while it is badass, when Superman says, I'm not impressed, we already knew that was going to happen. And I think all of your criticism, absolutely well-founded and well-stated. Good letter, man. Thanks for writing in. I very much appreciate it. Yeah, you guys are not letting me down. So that's pretty amazing. This one comes from Mario Lopez. Not that Mario Lopez. Hi, Sir Robert, the true Hollywood knight. It's Mario Lopez again, and I am very unhappy. After the disappointments I had with Disney Star Wars and Alex Kurtzman's Star Trek, finally there's something I loved. Zack Snyder's Justice League. It seems that the film being a great success, but what happens? The head of Warner says that she doesn't want to finish the story and takes the opportunity to attack the fans. Don't they know that no franchise will survive without the support of the fans? Don't they like money? Another question, does Zack Snyder really have the perfect idea of how the story will continue and ends? Will Lois really die? Will Superman really become evil? Does Zack Snyder have everything planned, or is he breathing with a sigh of relief? No one will find out that he had no idea how this story was going to end. I heard yesterday on the last Robservations that perhaps they could finish Zack Snyder's vision in a comic. But again, I ask, would it not be more interesting for it to end in 1 or 2 films, but in an anime style or even totally in CGI? Maybe. I think that more and more we're seeing these types of combinations. For example, Blade Runner 2049 has 3 prequel short stories in animation. Altered Carbon has an animated film. Army of the Dead is going to have the animated Army of the Dead, the prequel. And Train to Busan, what a fabulous film, has a prequel with the name Seoul Station. Rob, would such a solution be possible for Zack Snyder's vision? I could see that happening. I could see DC Animation finishing Zack Snyder's story, his Justice League trilogy. I could absolutely see that happen. I wouldn't mind that either. And he could produce it. You know, why not? I don't know if that would ever happen. And again, everybody forgets that Zack Snyder's kind of got a good thing going with Netflix. And we might all want to see him fulfill his vision. But in a way, I kind of like where it is now. I think that Zack Snyder was able to come back and finish this thing. It was a triumph for everybody involved. And it's over. It's done. Take the win. You know, we're always trying to buy back our wins. I never understand it. This was an epic win for fandom. It was an epic win for Zack Snyder. We'll see in the next couple weeks. Was it an epic win for HBO Max? Who knows? We don't know yet. But I think, yeah, they could absolutely do that. I mean, it might not be what people want, but no one's going to spend another $300 million making a Justice League movie anytime soon. So, why not do it in animation? I think, yeah. Let's see. Omar94 writes in. Oh, wait a minute. You know what? I have to save this. I have to save this for Let's Get Physical Media, which I will do. Omar94 writes in and says, "Hi, Rob, moderators in the Post-Geek Singularity. We have seen a number of actors and actresses make career comebacks in recent years. Laura Dern made a comeback when she did Big Little Lies in television and movies like Star Wars, Little Women, and Marriage Story, which she won an Oscar for. Eddie Murphy made a comeback when he did the movie Dolomite Is My Name. He then made appearances on Saturday Night Live and recently did Coming to America. Jim Carrey made a comeback when he did the TV show Kidding and the movie Sonic the Hedgehog. While I like these actors and actresses, there's one person I hope returns to the spotlight in a big way. If anyone needs a career comeback, it's Nicolas Cage. People forget there was a time when he was one of the A-listers in Hollywood, starring in hit movies like Moonstruck, The Rock, Con Air, Face Off, and others. I'm not sure what led him to become a joke to people, since he's actually a really good actor and even has an Oscar for his performance in Leaving Las Vegas. I don't know if he'll ever have a chance to make a comeback, but it would be nice to see that. Thanks, and live long and prosper." I'm right there with you, son. Omar, I would love to see. I love Nicolas Cage. I mean, look, I think, from what I understand, he had some tax issues, like profligate spending, and he ended up owing millions of dollars in taxes, so he's been doing anything he can to make money. And I think it's harder and harder for him to find the kind of roles. He is a quirky actor, but, you know, I really liked him in things like Richard Stanley, who also himself recently got canceled, but Richard Stanley's Color Out of Space. And I think whenever he's in a movie, he's certainly not phoning it in. So he's not like Bruce Willis, who walks around like some lobotomized zombie. You know, I need $1 million. I'll show up for a couple days to be in your movie. And I don't know what happened there, but it's kind of strange. But I think at least Nicolas Cage gives us crazy shit like Mandy, and like some of the stuff he's made is not good, like that martial arts film that just came out. But still, crazy stuff. But I'm with you. I'd love to see Nicolas Cage top line a movie. I mean, go back and watch Adaptation. It wasn't that long ago that he was doing some really, really, really great stuff. Great stuff. Here's a letter from Sky that I will read. "Hi, Rob. Dota Dragon's Blood is awesome." Oh, thank you very much. I will pass that along to Ashley Miller. "I don't know anything about Dota, but I really enjoy learning about this world. The music is so cool and an interesting mix with the fantasy epic storytelling. I could just listen to the score and be happy. It's very cool to see your name in the credits, and I'm recommending the show to my family and friends. The animation style is very good, but my friend and I are consistently distracted by the noses of the characters when shown face on, though they look perfectly fine from the side profile view. Do you know what I mean? I know. Perhaps if this is a common concern, it can be passed on to the animators for their future work. Thank you and have a better day, Sky." Well, the animation is all done by Studio Mir in Korea. I thought they did a wonderful job. The show is really beautiful looking, and the use of color, but I think it's kind of an affectation more than anything else. I think that's where it sort of comes from. Okay, I think I can read this one. This one comes from Catherine Cook. Catherine Cook says, "Hey, Rob, given that next week we'll see the release of Godzilla vs. Kong, I figured I'd share my take on these two metal titans of monster cinema. My first introduction to Godzilla was the myriad of spoofs featuring people fleeing in terror. Then the 1998 film, which isn't really Godzilla at all, followed then by clips of the Showa-era films, which I've yet to acquire on Criterion, where it has the distinction of being Spine 1000. Yes, it does. I have mine right over there. For decades, I always imagined what Godzilla was, a giant of Japanese cinema symbolizing the effects of nuclear testing, the atom bomb, come to life. An ironic criticism of America's nuclear testing and use of nuclear weapons, given the immediate reasons behind its creation. But for some reason, it just wasn't clicking with me enough to actually sit down and watch a true Godzilla movie from start to finish, even though I always had a positive opinion about Godzilla himself. Not until fall 2019, when I saw Godzilla, King of the Monsters, which I was interested in due to my penchant for liking dragons, hydras, and other serpents, did I finally click with the character of Godzilla. I gotta say, that movie had some pretty metal beasts in it. Mothra, the gorgeous giant moth emerging from behind a waterfall, Rodan, the Petrodon emerging from a volcano, and my favorite, King Ghidorah's grand entrance from the ice in Antarctica. However, despite how much I love King Ghidorah the monster, he didn't seem to carry the weight of Godzilla, partly because the human characters who unleash him are so cheesy compared to the people in the other installments in this current Monsterverse, but mostly since his reveal is more plot-oriented, it's that it's a necessary part of the story, but doesn't get to take its sweet time like with Godzilla's rejuvenation in the underwater city. I mean, the build-up to Godzilla's reveal and godlike awe he's regarded as just elevates his status like none of the others, and it helps to have a veteran actor like Ken Watanabe gawking over him. I only just saw Gareth Edwards' Godzilla a few days ago, and I love the lengthy build-up to Godzilla's introduction there too, with just fleeting glimpses here and there, and the finale finally allowing Godzilla to shine in all his glory. By telling that story like it's a disaster film instead of a kaiju film, I felt that godlike sense of awe which I hadn't felt from some of the monsters in the other films, such as Rodan, in which the story unfolds like a standard B monster movie with your slow build-up, civilian surviving encounters with the creature, scientist characters over-explaining the science, and finally the reveal and defeat of the monster. A rinse, dry, repeat formula which left me sour that the monsters tended to lose, because yeah, if I'm watching a monster film like this, then I really want them to win. Because why not? That'd be a pretty metal ending, right? Enter King Kong. That's another character who I can't remember how I first heard of him, but one image which has struck in my mind for decades was of Kong stepping on someone early in the 1933 film on the island. Something was so striking about it. I don't think I saw that all the way through until the 2010s, and I was won over by Ray Harryhausen's stunning work bringing Kong to life. It was actually Willis O'Brien who brought Kong to life, wasn't it? I think that first King Kong iconography I can recall was actually the entrance gate to Jurassic Park. The first version of that story I saw all the way through. It was the 1976 film, which I barely remember, but the Peter Jackson film I recall vividly due to the long build-up to Kong's reveal, and even more so, the cult of Kong existed on Skull Island. The sound of the waves crashing on the rocks by the ship, the wind ripping along the cliffside, the relentless rainstorm, the drums, the chanting, and the crackling of flames from the village. It was crazy, and I was second-guessing what was on the other side of the gate. I knew logically it was a King Kong movie, but damn it, I kept thinking something far more godlike was about to appear, and yet that's exactly what happened. It didn't hit me that way until the T-Rex fight, just how much of a titan Kong truly was, with all of his might and nuance brought to life by effects wizards and Andy Serkis's performance. And so I found the King Kong story stands out, because Kong isn't demonized, but you connect with him and feel for him when he dies in every version of the story. That's something I don't feel in a lot of other monster movies. The next iteration, Kong Skull Island, I first heard through TV spots, which got me excited by the notion of John Goodman and Samuel L. Jackson going on a camping trip. Oh, the possibilities, Rob. But alas, that's not the focus of that movie, and the humor comes more from the John C. Reilly character. But there, too, I was pleasantly surprised to see yet another cult of Kong, respecting the majestic king as the eighth wonder of the world, as it were. He was once again portrayed as sympathetic yet dominant. Thus, in both cases, I imagined the two majestic titans for decades before actually seeing the films which made them famous. That, I suppose, is the power of these two characters to permeate our pop culture so much that you don't even need to see the films to be already in awe of what they are. So as metal as it's going to be to watch these two titans duke it out next week on HBO Max, I'm torn because I don't want either of them to lose. But on the flip side, I really want the film to commit to a definite winner. Well wishes, Rob. And I hope you love the movie. That from Catherine Cook. That's very interesting, Catherine. You know, I can't believe, were you dissing on the movie Rodan because you actually watched Rodan? because Rodan is one of my favorite kaiju films of all, mostly because it was one I first saw as a kid and it scared the hell out of me. I love Rodan. You should watch, you didn't mention it, but you should watch the last Toho Godzilla film, Shin Godzilla. It's a different look at Godzilla than we've seen from Toho. And you should also watch Godzilla GMK All Out Monsters Attack. Watch that. Those are definitely something that you should check out because they're good. Let's see. I think we'll jump in and see what you guys are saying. What are you saying? No idea. So we're going to jump in and find out. Find out what's up. Dakota's here, and Dakota says, what are your thoughts on the 1922 silent vampire film Nosferatu and the copyright lawsuit that followed, almost wiping the film out of existence? Well, first, I love Nosferatu. I love the look of that character. I think that's still, when I think of vampire, I think of the 1922 silent Nosferatu. The scratchy black and white image. That kind of Reggie Nalder then recreates that kind of look in the Salem's Lot miniseries that Tobe Hooper directed. But I don't know much about the copyright lawsuit. I'd love to find out about that, but I don't. But I do love the iconic look. I mean, I'm a big fan of a lot of, especially German expressionism, what was going on, whether it was like Sunrise. And the Germans, man, during the 20s, I think it was probably still the Weimar Republic, they really knew what they were doing in terms of that German expressionism, man, because there's still those powerful images. Calvin Bose is here. Last night I took my son to the drive-in to see the 1931 King Kong on the big screen. It was amazing, and my youngest cried when Kong died. See, this is the thing. This is why, Calvin, I'm Team Godzilla all the way. Look, I understand we all want to be King Kong's friend. But since the movie is called Godzilla versus Kong, you have to put yourself in the mindset of a battle here. Godzilla would kick King Kong's ass up one side and down the other. King Kong was taken out by biplanes in the original King Kong. Biplanes with machine guns. I mean, give me a break. Give me a break. Those bullets wouldn't have even penetrated Godzilla's hide. King Kong's a softie. King Kong's a guy you want to, like, take home to mom. King Kong falls in love. You know, Godzilla King Kong has nothing on Godzilla, just being, and then of course they've increased him in size because they had to. Otherwise Godzilla would have just stomped on King Kong. But since we're up for a fight, Godzilla's been to space. Godzilla's been to Planet X, and been brainwashed by the aliens. Anyway, I'm Team Godzilla all the way. I just want to say. Calvin says, but Braxton told him it'll be okay because he fights Godzilla when they play Godzilla versus Kong next week at the drive-in. Well, Calvin, that's good. You're lucky you have a son like Braxton who understands how that all works. 200 Watt Studio sends in a super chat and says, yes, I got my Dawn of the Dead 4K box minus the CDs from Zavi. I can't wait to see what's in it. Thanks, Rob, for the heads up. Stuff is coming from Australia, too. Well, 200 Watt Studio, you know how we feel about that. Tomorrow, you will see Dieter and I waxing rhapsodic. I have a lot of stuff to show tomorrow. It was a big week, including I got a box from Dieter himself. Willow is here. Willow says, I remember you read an article a while back about how the theatrical cut of Justice League was whitewashed for diminishing the roles of several black and Asian characters. Now that the Snyder cut is out, do you think that's a fair assessment? I do. The storyline of Cyborg alone and Iris West. I mean, is there a cuter girl, a cuter woman ever to appear in a movie than Iris West in the Snyder cut? I mean, I want to hear her speak. I want to hear her voice. Damn cute. She was gone, and a lot of the stuff with Cyborg's father and his mother and the Atom, the future Atom. Yes, an Asian character, but I think there was. I think that there. I don't know if consciously he's like, I'm going to snip out all the people of color from this film, but it does kind of look that way. Like, why diminish Cyborg's story so much in that cut of the film? What was it? You just didn't like the character? I mean, it seems so odd now. You go back and look at it. So I do think that it is a fair assessment. Yes. Yes, I do. Willow goes on to say, I personally think characters like Iris West and the Martian Manhunter probably should have been cut to trim the runtime. I do think that Cyborg was done dirty, though. He had a full character arc in the Snyder Cut that got butchered in the theatrical. Well, yes. I mean, if you wanted to cut the movie down, you could cut those things. But, I really liked seeing Barry Allen save somebody and getting a little insight into his life and all that. I thought that was okay. I like the idea of how the speed, his powers were depicted in that scene. Remember, not a lot of people, if you've never met that version of Barry Allen, that's when you get to see him exhibit his powers. So, and the Martian Manhunter stuff I really loved because I've always loved Martian Manhunter. To me, he's such a foundational member of the Justice League. During the Detroit era, he kind of ran the Justice League. Well, I can't. Well, I have it right there, but. So I love Martian Manhunter. So I'm glad to see him. I'm glad to see him in the film. 200 Watt Studio says, I got my imprint Blu-rays from Australia, The Deep and Black Sunday. I wish I was on physical media to talk about my haul. All these years, I've never heard the mail was nuke powered. Was it nuke powered? That's cool. But that Black Sunday disc is dope. For those of you who don't know, John Frankenheimer directed a very great thriller in the 1970s based on the first book by Thomas Harris, who wrote Red Dragon, Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal, and Hannibal Rising, called Black Sunday. And it was about terrorists who are going to blow up a Goodyear blimp over the Super Bowl. It's very prophetic. It's a great movie. And the imprint label out of Australia, who've been killing it lately, put it out on Blu-ray, which I picked up. Comes in a nice slipcase. I didn't get The Deep. I always remember thinking The Deep was disappointing to me because I wanted it to be as exciting as Jaws, and it wasn't. But I haven't seen it in a long time. Maybe I should go pick that up. Paul Gilmore says, Rob, remember back in the day everyone hated Snyder after Man of Steel and Batman v Superman to the point of boycotting and signing petitions for Warner Brothers to fire him off Justice League because he fucked up DC? I had someone tell me that Snyder makes Superman fly too fast. Oh, those were the days. Paul, yes, there were a lot of people that did not like his version of, which was weird. And I've been arguing with them ever since. I liked Man of Steel, and people are like, that movie sucked. And yet, here we are. Here we are. David Crabtree says, greetings, Sir Rob. Anyone want to feel old? Those born when the first live-action Transformers movie came out will begin high school this year. Wow. I love it when people put things that way because then I can relate. That's kind of crazy. You know what's even crazier? Today is the 40th anniversary of the release of Michael Mann's movie Thief. One of my favorite crime thrillers, almost one of my favorite movies, really. So that would have been on a Friday. This March 27th. I can tell you exactly what I was doing, too. I was on spring break visiting my grandfather. I would have been 13 still, visiting my grandfather. And we went to the theater. I was talking about this like last night on Midnight Metal. And there was some of the most egregious profanity. Robert Prosky's character there's a speech he gives with a lot of profanity I'd never heard before. And I'm sitting next to my conservative grandfather, and I'm like, I felt ashamed. I loved the movie. I still love the movie. Love the movie. I'm so happy Criterion put it out on Blu-ray. But, yeah. Anyway, so there's where I was 40 years ago today. I was in a theater in Palm Springs with my grandfather being horrified. And my sister and my grandmother went to see Tess, Roman Polanski's Tess. Stubble McShave says, nonlinear storytelling is very difficult to pull off if there's a focus on character development. It usually screws up the character arcs. It can also screw up the pacing. Making The Stand as a nonlinear story is beyond idiotic. I agree, Stubble, as evidenced by the final product. Sheriff Carl says, dude, I can't agree more about Game of Thrones. After they cut off Ned's head, my friend and I got Stark tattoos. That show is the best fucking episodic storytelling on TV ever, in my opinion. But then the end came, and it just shat on its own legacy. Sad. You know what? I will always find, and I thought the first 3 episodes of the 8th season, I was there for them. I'm like, I'm in. I find the final 3 episodes of Game of Thrones some of the most baffling narrative choices ever made. Ever made. And it, again, the White Walkers, what did they want? Why were they in this show? Why were we following them? It was so, we still don't know. It was so anticlimactic. It was like, what? They clearly wanted to do something, and then they didn't want to go to Winterfell. You know, what do they want to do? If I'd made that show, I would have had the Battle of Winterfell, everybody's ready, and then the White Walkers just walked. They just continued past Winterfell. That wasn't their thing. I didn't understand that. It's so, and how do you have Cersei Lannister and Daenerys Targaryen, who are setting up for this major clash, and they only kind of look at each other. She's on the battlements or something, and Daenerys is on the ground. And Cersei has rocks fall on her. After all that, it was so lame. I mean, it was so, from a narrative storytelling standpoint, it would be like somehow ending Lord of the Rings, where none of those things, like Sam and Frodo, they just decide, they're like, you know what, this is too hard. You know, let's just keep the ring, and whatever happens, happens. You know, I mean, I don't know. It was. My friend Terje, I always say Terj, but Tmork, TTM, albeit not a TV series. I just finished watching Phantasm Scavenger. What a mess! Time flowing like the runs. Hi, Schweiger in his underpants. Yes. Phantasm Ravager is, you're right. It's not great. Not great. Why are you watching that movie? Go watch the first Phantasm again. Stub McShave sends in a tip and says, we didn't have much plot development for the MCU in WandaVision. In Falcon and Winter Snowman, there's a strong focus, Falcon and Winter Soldier. There's a strong focus on both character development as well as driving the plot for the MCU forward. Do you think people can watch Falcon and Winter Soldier without having seen a lot of the earlier MCU movies? I think they can, but I think it works better if you know who these characters are and you know their history. I mean, I'll be curious to see where it goes. I've been really enjoying it, but after hearing our letter from our friend in Argentina today, I'm like, it's definitely got a point. We'll see where it goes. But I'm into it. Gerard Leon says, hello, my fellow Dream On loving brother from another mother. I was on Amazon Prime and randomly saw that the comic book Invincible has been made into an adult animated series, and so far I'm really enjoying it. Have you seen it yet? I didn't even know. If you go on, I don't know if you went on. I didn't even know. I haven't seen it yet, but I really want to see it. I love the comic. So I can't wait to see the show, and I just haven't watched it yet. I've got to catch up on For All Mankind and watch Invincible, and I have to watch Greenland. Latino Slant, Paulie from Latino Slant is here. Great letter, Julian. Eso. It was a great letter. I thought it was a great letter. Really good letter. Good to see you, Paulie. By the way, since he's here, everybody should go subscribe to Latino Slant on YouTube. And, if you haven't subscribed to me, go subscribe to me too. But rush on over to Latino Slant's channel and give him a subscribe. Ross Gecko sends in a super chat and says, thoughts on non-Watchman Alan Moore. Just finished first volume of a Swamp Thing run, and I'm blown away. Think Swamp Thing can ever be done justice on film? Ross, I got to tell you, I love Alan Moore. I love From Hell. I loved Swamp Thing. I loved V for Vendetta. I'm a huge Alan Moore fan. I even have all of his America's Best Comics stuff, the Absolute editions, big Watchmen, of course. Huge Alan Moore fan. But what he did on Swamp Thing, my God, amazing. He's amazing. I don't know if you could ever. I mean, I guess you could. I just don't know if. I mean, I thought the Swamp Thing TV series was. If they had continued it, it could have gotten pretty good. But I think it's hard. I think it's really hard to depict Swamp Thing the way Alan Moore depicted him because of just what he looks like physically on film. You know, I don't know if people could get into it, but maybe they could. But Alan Moore's Swamp Thing run is, I mean, it's superlative. It's just extraordinary. AJDZ AJDZ sends in a super chat and says, Zach and Joss are as different directors as JJ and Rian Johnson. Zach on God opera level. Joss humanizes but undercuts original vision. Wonder Woman falls on Flash. I know. Ross Gecko says, a twist ending. Rob writes all the letters to himself. I don't. But by the way, AJ, I agree with you. They're very different directors. Very, very different directors. And I think it was they hired Joss Whedon because he made the Avengers movies. From a corporate standpoint, makes perfect sense. Artistically, probably should have made sense too. But the difference between Zack Snyder's style and Joss Whedon's style is like night and day. They're like the two guys I would least want to put together. So you're absolutely right about that. Ross, I do not write the letters to myself. God, I wouldn't have time. But that's very funny. Rob Altus says, Rob, your show is informative and entertaining. You shouldn't feel conflicted. You are one of us, a fan of culture. Hail RMB. Yeah, but I still think it's like, okay, I always had like a perception problem when I first made Free Enterprise. I spent a year going to industry meetings. And I came very close to directing. Very close to directing Dude, Where's My Car? Very, very close. I was in the room. I was in Fox pitching and the reason I think I didn't get it was because the original script was it was a drug movie. And it was like a Cheech and Chong movie. It was Cheech and Chong meets Repo Man. And I love that. And I thought, okay, I really like this movie. What really appealed to me was in the early aughts, doing a movie like Dude, Where's My Car, which I thought was funny, but doing a drug movie, the subversive. I'm not even a stoner. I've never liked pot. Give me ecstasy or cocaine, though. No, I'm just kidding. Well, not really, but I haven't done drugs in 20 years almost. Well, yeah, but and not for lack of not wanting to or having anything against them. I just haven't. I don't party that way anymore because I'm getting older. But if they legalize great ecstasy, I'm there for that. Let me tell you. But I like the idea that they wanted to make a drug movie, so I leaned heavily into that in my pitch. But that's what was in the script. And then after it was me and I forget who directed Dude, Where's My Car, but he passed away of cancer recently. But they decided to change direction and not make it about drugs, not make these guys such stoners. And because I leaned so heavily, I didn't get the job. But after that, I had when I always had a problem. Like when I went into that room, they expect you to be like a director, to act like a director, meaning you've got to go in and command the room. You've got to pitch things. And I was like, I'm still a fan. I was always still trying to relate to people because I'd worked at Warner Brothers, so I could relate to executives, and so I was doing that. I don't think I was forceful enough. I always had a problem like walking into the room and being, "Hi, I'm the director of this," and act that way. I think that's part of the problem with my career. Maybe was that I didn't act the part. I was too much of a fanboy and too much of I'm so happy to be in the room, even though I knew how to make these things and backwards and forwards. But I always had that perception, and I think that I still feel that like doing this YouTube show, if I went in to to pitch a movie, I would feel odd, like, oh, I wonder if these people watch my YouTube show. Like, if they've watched Midnight Metal, can I still walk in and but be the director of a film and command the respect you need? But I'm glad you like the show. Thank you, Rob. I appreciate it. Stubble says, Rob, I find it troubling that you say you have one foot in the grave. You must take care of yourself so you get to see the end of the Wheel of Time series. I do. I need to take better care of myself. You know, and I will. I should, starting now. Between Diet Coke and beer and whatever. Yeah, but you're probably right. I do need to see the end of the Wheel of Time series. Trekkie sends in a tip and says, William Shatner says he's never seen an episode of Star Trek, says it's too painful. Isn't that sad? Well, you know what? I knew that about Bill, and when we worked together, he kind of would talk. He doesn't like watching himself. And I was like, really? But you have to understand, unlike us, anyone who's worked actors, like Brent Spiner told me the same thing. Brent Spiner told me when we were interviewing him for the Blu-rays for Next Generation that he's never seen an episode of Next Gen. And the only stuff he's really seen were the movies because he was contractually obligated to go to the premiere. And he said to me, you know, I did Data for 7 years and I know what I did. And like, why would I go back and watch myself? And I kind of understand, like, I don't go back and watch these shows. You know, I know what I said, but I would never go back and watch unless somebody says I've said something egregious or done something wrong. Then I might go back and watch them. But you know, once you do the work, it's hard. Like, people think I watch Free Enterprise all the time. I don't. I hadn't looked at it in years until I was recutting the clips for my new version of the movie and the presentation I had to make. So I don't know if it's so sad because he would never be able to watch it the way we watch it. You know, he'd only be able to criticize it, and I understand where he's coming from. I believe that's true too. I believe he hasn't watched a whole episode. I believe that. Sheriff Carl sends in a tip and says, I watch you for a few reasons. You're sharp and you know your shit. You nerd out on shit I do. You're funny and from Seattle. I have a lot of friends and we have our shared interests, but none of them collect Blu-rays. None of them geek out on shit I do or are metal. Yeah. Yeah, you know what? I miss Seattle. I miss going to, like, I really hope that places like Spud Fish and Chips on Alki, I hope Spud is still there. I know Dick's Drive-In is still there, right? I hope those places survive this pandemic. Evan Newman says, speaking of a show that isn't ruined by lazy storytelling trends, Dota Dragon's Blood was fantastic. Well done to all involved. I'm eagerly anticipating book 2. Well, Evan, I have to say that one of the joys of working on Dota was I would kind of get to see it the way you guys got to see it, because I would come in sort of late in the process, and when I would sit down and I was given an animatic to start working on, we'd go through it, and I was seeing it for the first time, and it was like it was all kind of put together, and so I could experience the story of it all, and I thought it was fantastic. I thought, you know, Ashley Miller, who's a friend of mine, and Steve Melching, the supervising producer, they really did a good job scripting the show. And look, I hope that I hope it gets a second season. I hope Netflix greenlights it, because I know what Ashley wants to do, and I know where he wants to take the show, and it's only going to get better if they're allowed to do it. So yeah, yep. Thanks for watching, everybody. For those of you who don't know, Dota Dragon's Blood, I worked on it in a small capacity as the animatic editor. Is now on Netflix. It dropped on Netflix on Thursday the 25th. Watch it. It's very bingeable. It's only 8 episodes. It's a book 1, and it's quite a ride for anybody that likes adult anime and enjoys fantasy storytelling. Ash Chowan is here. Ash Chowan is here. Hello, Ash. How are you? A young Darkseid defeated by what was, in essence, the first Justice League and sent back to Apocalypse was foreshadowing the current Justice League defeating him. We know that Superman and company will win in the end, and even against a seasoned and wiser Darkseid. That's true. I think so. But it's still, I mean, I understand where the disappointed, our disappointed imagination connoisseur was coming from. I mean, I kind of get that. Like, once Darkseid's been defeated back in the day, but now you have a Kryptonian, so I could see that. But you're right. I mean, you're right too that there was that foreshadowing. So 487 Sean Tower says, Rob, I agree with you so much. An actor's engagement forgives a lot, and Cage was always engaged. Yet many top liners phoned it in. A great point. Give me actors and directors who care about their craft. I think most people do, but it's interesting to me. Clearly, like a guy like Bruce Willis doesn't anymore. I mean, even judging from the movies that he's in, like, what is it, Cosmic Sin or the Cosmic something that he's in now? I mean, I think about how much fun Bruce Willis, I mean, maybe you just get tired and don't want to do it anymore. You just need the money and you're going through the motions. Because he used to do such interesting things. Like, what was it like for him to go work with Luc Besson on The Fifth Element? Or Alan, oh God, when he did the Breakfast of Champions, what was that like to work on? I mean, he did a lot of Hudson Hawk. He did a lot of crazy stuff, and clearly he cared, even though it was weird. But nowadays he did Pulp Fiction, of course. But nowadays, I don't know. I don't know. Sheriff Carl says King Kong has better chest hair and hotter nipples. I got my tickets to see it at the Aurora Oak Tree next Saturday. Wow, the Oak Tree. Where I saw my first THX movie, Top Gun. I'm going to be so pumped from that shit, I might need to get a $40 handy and some Burgermaster afterwards. Gotta love Aurora Avenue. Wow, can you still get a $40 handy on Aurora Avenue? Not that I've ever gotten one myself. But I thought they would have cleaned that place up, especially now with all the tech that's moved in that area. That's a Seattle joke for those of you who might not be following. 200 Watt Studio sends in a super chat and says, Willem Dafoe nailed Max Schreck in Shadow of the Vampire. Loved his Max Schreck. I loved Shadow of the Vampire. It's not great, but it's still pretty good. And, who would have thought that they would have made a movie about the making of Nosferatu? Loved it. Louis Terrazas is back. Hello, Louis. Hey, Rob, I'm a super James Bond fan like yourself. I'd like to ask you if you would be up to writing an editorial about where you see the franchise going. In many ways, I felt that they wasted the potential of Daniel Craig. Louis, you and I park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. I will reserve final judgment until I see No Time to Die. I loved Casino Royale. I even am a Quantum of Solace apologist, but I hated Skyfall, and Spectre was just a crushing bore and a disappointment. And I can't believe it's such a strange thing to me that we see Bond begin in Casino Royale, and the story is carried over and then by the time you get to Skyfall, it's like Bond's at the end of his career. Like, we never got a real Bond on a mission movie. We never got a James Bond movie from Daniel Craig. And I don't understand that. Like, just a Bond film. And this whole ongoing storyline, it's all one long... It's just... I wouldn't mind writing an editorial. But I agree with you. Chris C says, I saw someone say this. Game of Thrones had the most Game of Thrones ending. It killed off the fan base. Yeah, that is true. That is true. Anti-Godzilla, Devilzilla says, Godzilla vs. Kong is not a fair fight. Kong is the Batman to Godzilla's Superman. Ooh, I like that. I agree with that. And I hope Kong plugs Godzilla's mouth with his axe and corks his butthole with his hairy foot, exploding Godzilla's atomic core, his gooey atomic kaiju innards bathing Tokyo. # Team Kong. What is with everybody? What is with the anti-Asian bias here? Come on now. I think you need to embrace Godzilla. I mean, Kong is fine, but Kong is a tragic, romantic figure. He is doomed to die for falling in love with a woman he can never have. That's what Kong's purpose in life is, to die. Godzilla's purpose in life is to be awesome. Godzilla was, and even when Godzilla blows up or melts down, it's still awesome. But, and Godzilla went to space, man. Godzilla dances. There's a Godzilla dance. King Kong's purpose in life is to tragically die for the love of a woman. Godzilla will kick his ass. You murdered that guy. Send in a super chat. Says, thanks for the show. Well, you're welcome. You murdered that guy. I hope you weren't directing that at me, because I'm sorry if I murdered somebody. I was unaware of that. So maybe I can get off with my manslaughter charge. Stub McShave says, I saw that George R. R. Martin got a 5-year deal with HBO developing new shows. I wonder how he will find the time with all of his time writing the next book. Oh, right. It seems he'll do anything to not have to write books. That's what people say. That's what people say. You know, I would love to see, I really hope they do the Wild Card series. I know it's over at Universal, but they just got rid of another showrunner. They should make it for HBO Max. I think it'd be great. You know what I'd love to see? I'd love to see HBO Max do a movie of his book Fever Dream. Basically Vampires on the Mississippi. I'd love to see that. I think it'd be good. Roberto Suarez says, I'm exhausted today. I forgot I had to get up early to go on a bike ride. Well, who cares? Because it was metal. Last night was so metal. That stream turned into a 4-hour stream almost. That was crazy. Crazy. Louis Terrasa says, I wish Quantum Leap had a better ending. Hashtag save Sam. I'm surprised they don't bring that back. You know, why not? Alexander Wilson is here. Alexander Wilson says, racism is a global topic issue. Look at Meghan Markle. She was the biggest trending topic in the world for a while. A lot of people were talking about racism in Europe. Just go and ask Good Morning Britain. Oh, I know. You know, somebody hates, wherever you go in the world, they hate somebody. Human beings, if nothing else, human beings will figure out some reason or to hate other people. Racism is everywhere. Everywhere. But yeah, I just think it's I just don't get it. That's why if you travel around the world and meet a bunch of people, everybody should travel. The more you travel, the less racist you are, I think. Our friend Tears back. Phantasm, first time, throwaway to last movies, suck, whatever. Tell me the three things most. Wait a minute. I don't know what you're saying. I don't know what you're saying here. Trek and Shatner. I'm not sure. I'm not following you, but I'll drink to you all the way there in Norway. But tell me the three things most a wee sum with the movie. Trek, Shatner. I don't know what you're asking. I agree with you, though. Trek, Shatner. You, my friend in Norway, you're drinking alcohol, aren't you? I know you are. It's late there. Alexander Wilson says, that piece about using time in storytelling was something I couldn't disagree with. For example, the chilling adventures of Sabrina in season 3 had a deus ex machina time travel to fix the main conflict that was beyond terrible. Just bad TV in general. I just love the fact that you're watching the chilling adventures of Sabrina. I heard it was pretty good. Actually, I haven't watched it. Evan Newman says, speaking of Thief, the album cover of Tangerine Dream's score is just awesome. It both references a scene in the film and also looks like an artistic visual representation of what listening to the album is like. The Criterion cover art is great too. The album cover was the one sheet. That was the actual key art that was on the movie posters and everything when that movie was released. I love that key art. It's so good. So good. The movie's good. If you guys haven't seen Thief, it's great. The opening scene's like 10 minutes long. They crack a safe, and it's all to this pounding Tangerine Dream music. It's so good. So Evan, I'm glad you're a fan. And that score, the Tangerine Dream score, is so good. Jared Leon says, hey Rob, I was enjoying Falcon and Winter Soldier, but then the part where the cops came and harassed Sam from 1 second to the next, it kind of took me out of it. And this is coming from a Hispanic male. Again, bashing my head with woke politics. What do you think? You know what? I think that it didn't. I know it was pretty woke. It was pretty egregious. But I think it was also. It didn't bother me as much as it's bothering some other people. I think they flipped the script there when they took Bucky away. But also, again. I think by having Isaiah in there, it brings up the idea of the Tuskegee experiments, and that's something that America has to deal with. It's part of our past that is shameful, And I do find it relevant to what's going on. Although Falcon and Winter Soldier doesn't seem to me to be necessarily a story about race relations, but we shall see. I mean, the idea of losing international boundaries, and that during the blip the international boundaries didn't really matter, and they wanted to continue that. I like that idea. That's a really interesting idea to explore. So we will see. But yeah, it was a little on the nose, to be honest, but it didn't bother me that much. The Real Mandarin sends in a tip and says, Marvel has a tendency of being the Neil Blomkamp of comic book films. They always introduce social and political metaphors, but only on the surface. They don't expand on these risque subjects. Still waiting on Stark's alcoholism and his role in the war on terror. I agree. But you know what? I think that the fact that they even touch on these things at all in those movies is more than a lot of other people would do. I agree with you. They only touch on them, and they never delve into them, and I think that might be problematic. But I do have to give them points for even going there in the first place. And I hope the Real Mandarin. I hope that's who Tony Leung is playing in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. I can't wait to see Tony Leung in a Marvel movie. It's just the coolest thing ever. The Real Mandarin. I just read that. So there you go. Sub McShave says, speaking of your work on Dota, how closely did the finished animation follow your edited animatic? Oh, exactly. I was the last person to edit before the show, before they got the animation. I would work with Ashley and his assistant Zach, and then the Eugene, who's one of the animation directors, and we all worked together. And during COVID, I was cutting with them, and what I finished went back to Studio Mirror in Korea, and then that was what was animated. But to be fair, I was more like the last person to look at it. I think Ashley wanted me to, and I also weigh in on the sound mix. I do some notes on the sound mixes as well, because when we get the sound mixes back, which is not part of my original purview, not part of my job, but I give notes to Ashley about the sound mixes because I think that they're important. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you guys had a problem if you watched Dota. I'd be curious when the battle that Slyrak has, the two dragons that fight in the opening episode, in episode 1, Alderak and the possessed dead Alderak, and then Slyrak. It's hard. I think it's hard to hear Terrorblade's voice and what Slyrak is saying. I feel that their dialogue gets buried in the mix, which is something that I really wish we could have addressed more. But but yeah, to answer your question, what went out of my computer was animated. Alexander Wilson says, speaking of Game of Thrones, I like the series ending. An HBO executive actually emailed the show's ending in 2016 to a colleague that was in that big Warner leak during that time. I was like, whoa, that was the ending? I read that 3 years ago. Yeah, I can't go there with you. I felt the ending did not do the rest of the series justice. And this idea that Daenerys Targaryen was going to go crazy like the Mad King, it just made no sense to me. It didn't make any sense, but, Brandon Sheehy says, Rob, what film do you think could possibly get the Snyder Justice League treatment and get the original vision restored? Do you think Disney would ever authorize the Lord and Miller cut of Solo? No. I would be fascinated to see their vision, as I found the original unmemorable. I don't think we're ever going to see that. I think it's a different situation because basically Zack Snyder had shot his movie and Lord and Miller didn't finish making their movie. So Zack Snyder, he had shot the movie and had a very unfinished cut of the movie, but he had it pretty much where he wanted it. So I think that's kind of different. That was different. It's a different situation. Look, the thing that I want most is I want the director's cut of Star Trek: The Motion Picture restored in 4K, but do it for real this time. Spare no expense and finish it for real and get it out there. That's the thing I want most is the director's cut of Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Alexander Wilson goes on to say, regarding Game of Thrones, the show ended almost 2 years ago and Winds of Winter is still not out. I already moved on from it. Also, with HBO Max trying to create a Game of Thrones universe, what are your thoughts on that effort? I just don't see... Look, they've done a Game of Thrones prequel. It could be great. You know, the what is it, House of the Dragon? If it's great, I'll watch it. You know, like anything. But I just don't have any enthusiasm for it anymore because to me, it did not end in a satisfying way. So I'm like, but if the prequel's good, you know, I would watch it. If they Better Call Saul it, I'll be like, okay, you know, I would watch. I don't know about the whole universe, but I would watch. And if the show's good, I'd watch. Attic Metal Hatch Koal says, I wonder if a metal mania will create an algorithm that brings in a different demographic. I can hear the first-time viewers now. What the fuck? An old douche yelling about Star Trek? And where's the fucking Judas Priest or Scorpions talk? Well, Bob, I think you might be right about that. I mean, you know, looking into my teen, I was never that much of a headbanger. I mean, I loved like Zeppelin and I love bands like that, but I was not into hair metal bands, not really. I mean, I like grunge stuff, obviously, because I came, but I never owned a Twisted Sister record. Although I wouldn't say, like, to me, Metallica, you know, Metallica is a great band. Iron Maiden, great band. Like, I listened to Number of the Beast. I was listening to that because I was putting together the playlist for the 666th episode. And I'm like, God, I love Iron Maiden. This is great. But it would be very funny. People are like, what's this? I want metal. And what's he talking about? Godzilla is here. Well, Godzilla, I hope you win. I'm Team U. I got thighs thicker than a milkshake inside of a Christmas loaf. Let that motherfucker Kong show up and try and do something. I'll headlock his ass into oblivion with my thighs and crack it open like an egg, using his skull to make a new Skull Island. Hashtag Teamzilla. Yes, I'm there for you. Chris C says, Kong is a simp. Hashtag Team Godzilla. Yeah. Bob Quall asks, Rob, what did you think of Dam Busters? I have not cracked mine open yet. But I need to watch it. I can't wait. I'm so behind. Vitaphone Vision and Sound sends in a super chat and says, skipped my last super chat. Saying another, I did. Don't sleep on Invincible. Good enough to send 2 super chats. Hopefully you and John will have a weekly. Wait a minute. Hang on. I thought I did. We did talk about Invincible, didn't we? I'm going back. Oh, yeah, here you are. You said, love the show, Rob. Been a fan since I found you on John Campia's show. I hope you guys don't sleep on Invincible. Would be cool to see a weekly chat on it. Yeah, I think we will. I mean, I definitely want to see it because as I said, I'm a huge fan of the comic. I really like the comic a lot. Sorry for missing your super chat. Brendan Sheehy says, Rob, your thoughts on the film Stranger Than Fiction with Will Ferrell? I found it both charming and understated with some insightful thoughts on life and literature. It's a pity that Will Ferrell's frat boy fans didn't give it a fair go back in the day. I liked it. I didn't love it. I wanted to love it more, but I thought he was good in it. Elizabeth is not a Will Ferrell fan, and I like Stranger Than Fiction. I mean, I like the subject matter. I thought it was good, but I didn't love it. Alexander goes on to say, Alexander Wilson says, if you watch season 3 of Sabrina, you'd be like, did Kurtzman write this? It was so bad that I had no interest in watching season 4. I was wondering about you, Alexander. Lame storylines, cardboard characters, and terrible time travel. It made no sense. It was so awful. How does that even happen? Vanessa G. Ramos says, I'm a new fan of yours and I find you so super sexy. I run a movie club at UCLA and I've put together film screenings. Would you be up to come see Dune with us in the fall? Yeah, I'd see Dune. You mean the new Dune? Yeah. And if you put together film screenings, I could screen my movie Free Enterprise and talk about it. Because, I'd be curious. I have a new cut of the movie that I'm working on, and it's only in standard def, though. But I'd love to show it to people that might not know the movie at all. Especially when you say you're in a club at UCLA, I assume you're a student at UCLA. I would be curious because there's a lot of, let's say, decidedly unwoke things in my film from 22 years ago, and I would be into that. So Vanessa, yeah, I'm down to see Dune. Absolutely. Gerard Leon sends in a tip and says, my cousin is getting married in Seattle this coming May. It was postponed from last year because of COVID. I just wanted to know, what should I see when I'm there? And I love Daniel Craig, and I like Quantum of Solace, but how do you hate Skyfall? You wound me, sir. Jared, the reason I don't like Skyfall is that it's a movie where James Bond repeatedly fails. And he fails at everything he's supposed to do in that movie. And I think that it irks me. So many things in that movie irk me to no end. I'm irked. I'm incredibly irked. But I could get into that. I could talk a lot more about Skyfall. But that's in a nutshell. It's a beautiful movie. It's a beautiful film. I love Daniel Kleinman's opening credits. I love the Adele's Skyfall song. I love Judi Dench. I love Silva as a character. But I mean, I don't like the fact that it just feels like a movie where they're like James Bond is being jobbed in his own film. And I don't dig it. In terms of Seattle, where you need to go see all of Seattle, first of all, the whole waterfront is amazing. You've got to go to like the Pike Place Market, go to Discovery Park. But there's one of the great things about Seattle is just the places. Go to see if, I don't know if the Crocodile Cafe is there. I mean, I haven't lived in Seattle in so long that I don't know, but go take the ferry, go to Bainbridge Island, drive around the Olympic Peninsula if you want. It's just gorgeous. And I don't know if you're an outdoorsy person, but go see Snoqualmie Falls, where the Twin Peaks Falls. It's beautiful up there. It's only like 45 minutes outside of Seattle, so it's not a very long drive. And go have lunch at the Snoqualmie Falls Lodge, and be sure and get the biscuits with the honey. They'll know. And if you say you're going, you're going to go in May, right? In May, yeah. But yeah, just check it out. Seattle's got a lot of stuff to go see, but it's just a great city, and you got to go see the Pike Place Market too. And there's a great comic book store in the Pike Place Market, Golden Age Collectibles. Fabrice sends in a super chat and says, I think Invincible could have been greenlit without The Boys' success, proper hardcore, and what a cast. Good week for animation between this and Dota. Well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. I think that had something to do with it. I think that nowadays a lot more, because of the success of superhero movies, the MCU superhero programming is in vogue, and the fact that they could go and do The Boys, I'm sure, had something to do with Invincible. Absolutely. Now I would love to see like somebody do The Authority. Alexander Wilson says, Campea called Daenerys crazy going back in season 5. He saw it coming. I did too. Somebody sane doesn't burn people alive or feed them to dragons. I don't know. I mean, you know what though? It was just she was returning the brutality that was being done to other people. She was the breaker of chains. I don't necessarily think. I mean, maybe I just didn't feel that just having her go crazy seemed like you're slighting the rest of the characters. Like, it wasn't just about her. And the fact that she went nuts and burned King's Landing, I felt like, well, there's a lot of other storylines going on. I mean, Cersei Lannister, where was she going to wind up? And I felt like that what they did to her at the end was she basically sat in a balcony for the last season and looked out. And I'm like, that was lame. The Night's King, all that stuff. It was, what did they want? Why were they marching? They clearly had a strategy. They wanted to take down the wall, but what did they want? Like, why were they marching? Where were they going to go? It felt, I don't know. But maybe that she could be crazy, but the story was not just about her going crazy and killing everybody. There was more going on, and I felt the rest of it wasn't served. There's no real comeuppance for Jaime, not really. And the fact that they were in the castle and they just had rocks fall on them. I'm like, really? After everything we've been through with these characters, that's how you're going to kill these characters? I mean, they didn't get stories satisfactorily resolved in my mind. So that bummed me out. Sheriff Carl says, Iron Maiden are objectively the greatest band ever. They're like Monty Python meets Spinal Tap, and they've got their own fucking airliner jet that Bruce flies. They also have the best merch. And they have Eddie. I love Maiden. What's not to love? Ash Chowan is here. Ash says, simple chimpanzees can literally tear humans to shreds with little effort. Watch out, Godzilla. watch out. Kong ain't no chimp, but Godzilla just might be a simp. Hashtag Team Kong. Come on, man. I mean, what has King Kong ever really done other than on Skull Island besides fall in love and die? You know? That's okay. Alexander Wilson says, a show that started off awesome was Issa Rae's Insecure. I like her a lot. The first 2 seasons were great. If you want to see what the black millennial experience is, watch Insecure. It's the best telling of that experience, but season 4 was bad. They repeated storylines. Ooh, you know what? I will watch. I've caught a few episodes, but I haven't watched it from beginning to end. I should sit down and do that. James Lockman says, Aloha, Rob. Any new Hot Toys added to your collection? I am debating on pulling the trigger on the Darth Maul Mythos and maybe the Sidious and Asajj Ventress Mythos figures. You know what? I didn't know they were doing those. Are those statues? Are those Mythos statues, or are they actual figures? Because they did the Boba Fett Mythos figure and the Obi-Wan Kenobi, which I have, which I really like. I think those figures are great. I didn't know they were going to do an Asajj Ventress figure. I thought those were... But... James, I am paying off things. You want to see something that's really disturbing? Show you something that's really disturbing. So, this is so disturbing. So I ordered the Freddie Mercury. I'm building my my fictional band. Is this one? Which one of these did I open already? So maybe it was this one. So I've got my John Lennon, and then I have my Jimi Hendrix coming, and then I ordered the head and the clothes of Freddie Mercury because I want to have my ultimate. I mean, the fact that they're making 6 scale, so the Freddie Mercury doesn't have a body, so I had to buy one. I had to buy a body. And this one, you know what? I'll order the other one. Let me open the other one because it'll this will make. I promise you, this is worth it. So I buy this body where I'm going to put the Freddie Mercury head and the clothes on, because it doesn't. A lot of action figures you can just buy heads and clothes and they don't have bodies. So this is a Fison body, and this is so disturbing. So I had never, ever bought one of these bodies before. And they're really great. They're seamless bodies. So here is... Here, let me show this because this is just hilarious. Stick with me. You're going to love this. So here's the body. And you can see that it's a seamless body. And it feels like flesh. Right? So it comes with this pouch. And I'm like, what was in here? I'm not kidding. I am not kidding. It comes with... It comes with members. That's right, members. It comes with 2 different sizes. You can pick which one you want to use. I think I'm going to use the big one for Freddy. And then, most disturbingly... it came with an erect member. Like, I had no idea that this was the case. I've never seen an action figure that's anatomically correct. I hope Willow is enjoying this. But Justin Kane from Justin's Collection told me which body to buy for the Freddie Mercury figure, not telling me that it came with different, not only one penis, but multiple penises. I mean, who is going to use the erect penis? And what would you use it for? I don't even want to know. But there you go. So you can all share in the humor of buying an action figure that comes with penises. So there you go. This was my, in terms of buying things for the week. Well, actually, I bought these a while ago, but it took them a while to get here. So to answer your question, there you go. And what's so funny is, depending on which one you use, I love the fact that then you have extra penises to do things you want later. But there's where we're at. There's where we're at. Anatomically correct action figures. Let's see. So there you go, James. Claudia says, Rob, did you forget we had a Skyfall discussion? It was a whole show. I did not forget that. Yes, to be honest, I did. I forgot it, but you're reminding me. On Whining About Movies, we did do an entire episode with Skyfall, and we had Claudius before he had his multiple personalities. Claudius was on, and it's actually a great discussion. So if you want to dig deep into Skyfall, go and listen to the Whining About Movies episode about Skyfall. Louis Terrazas, sorry about that, Claude. I should have remembered that. My mind full of things. Louis Terrazas sends in a super chat and says, Rob, did you see the China box office for Kong? I did not. Can you ask Campy if you can do a pregame together? I'm so hyped, but the community needs a super show. I could ask him. I can definitely ask him if we can do a pregame for Godzilla versus Kong. I can't wait to see it. Ash Chauhan says King Kong versus Godzilla, Godzilla versus King Kong is expected to have a $90 million opening weekend overseas. I hope this film is the one to bring back a semblance of normalcy back to the U.S. box office with more theaters, especially the ones here in L.A. open again. Man, I hope so. I hope so. Roy Kirk became a member. Cousin Neil became a member. Rojo Diablo and Paula Crabtree became members. I think you probably became members a while ago, but we're just now getting around to hearing about it. Well, that brings me, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, kind souls, gentle beings, however you identify across these 28 known galaxies. Robservations, episode number 653 comes to an end. I can't believe I showed 6-scale penises on this show, but you never know. You just never know what's going to happen. And when I get the Freddie Mercury, I'll put the Jimi Hendrix. The Jimi Hendrix figure is amazing. And then I'll put them all together, building the band. I wish somebody would do a Prince figure. I would love to get a great 6-scale Prince figure. Claudia says the Night King in Game of Thrones was looking for the Time Stone. Note, another loose thread from Game of Thrones was that Bran figured out time travel without the aid of the Time Stone or the Quantum Tunnel. Yeah. James Lockman says the Mythos line is statues. The mall is 23.5 inches in height. Are those the 7 samurai figures behind you? I've been wanting a Toshiro Mifune for a long time. Good eye, James. Yes. These figures, actually, there's regular one from Star Trek 2. It shouldn't be there, but these figures, there's a company that doesn't exist, I don't think, anymore called Alfrex, and they made a box set of all 7 samurai figures. It came in one box, and then this is Toshiro Mifune as Yojimbo right here. So I just had, and then of course Nathan Algren behind him. So I that's where I have them, but they're hard to find. But I'm sure you could find the Alfrex Toshiro Mifune somewhere. They also did a Lone Wolf and Cub, which is great, which I should get and put it up on the old shelf there. But yes, sir. So that's what those are. So I want to thank everybody. I first want to thank Mike Bodden and the Richard and my entire moderating staff. Justin Toner is here. Cardinal Sin, were you here too? Brian Hepburn is here. I think Louise X. Purple Valkyrie is here. Bunyan Snipe is here. Louise X Sparrow is here. Everybody's here. Amazing. You guys are great. Justin Toner's here. What a great. I guess it's great then that I was able to show 6-scale peen. I know that on Whining About Movies I should have waited and I should have given them to you know what, I'll show on Whining About Movies next. I don't know exactly what we're going to do. We're probably going to do one tomorrow. I will show her 6-scale peen live and see what she says, because it'll be funny. Everybody think that's funny. So I want to thank everybody for supporting the channel via Super Chats and tips. I want to thank you all for writing in letters. You can write me letters. It's free of charge. You can write them to me at the Burnettwork.net website. There's a section you can go in the top right corner. Send me letters. I've got more to read. I love letters. And, Elizabeth just sent me messages. Maybe she was watching the show and she saw 6-scale peen. And, Heavy Metal Dance Party after the show by the Richard on Facebook. So there you go. There's a heavy metal dance party on the Post-Geek Singularity Facebook page. So go there. Heavy metal dance party, posted by the Richard. So there you go. Robservations 653. There we're at. We'll be back tomorrow. I don't know exactly. Probably 2:30. And tomorrow we are also going to have a members chat that I postponed from today to tomorrow. It's going to happen tomorrow, only because we were up doing the metal midnight metal at till 4 a.m. We did a huge stream. But I want to thank everybody for the support. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say to all of you, have a better day. And I mean that sincerely.